Tian doesn't know whether he's pretending to be like it or not. He can't accurately judge the symptoms after poisoning before verifying the toxicity. It could be death or serious injury. But Tian can't pretend to be dead in the dark fog. He can only pretend to be affected by toxicity. It seems that his performance has some effects. More and more Mingxiu are chasing after him, and there are Mingxiu coming here in other directions. This is a posture of killing you while you are ill. From this point of view, Tian is more sure of the problem of Ming poison. Mingxiu who came after him may be to see if he is really poisoned, or he wants to take this opportunity to kill himself directly. With more and more people killing themselves, Tian felt that he was going to be unable to carry on. If he continued to go out of the dark fog at this speed, he would be surrounded. At that time, he could only release the magic weapon again, and the cave would suppress it. In that way, his false poisoning would be exposed. If you don't use the magic weapon cave, if you don't want to die, you should also use other means. The final result is also exposure. Thinking of this, Tian simply released the flying saucer, stumbled up the flying saucer, and then hit it with a magic power. He rushed out of the dark fog with the flying saucer. Even the martial spirit puppets ignored it and rushed out of the dark fog. It's strange that the palace master came out so soon, and he came out by flying saucer? In the Huathan stone defense area, when many monks were waiting for them, they suddenly saw Tian's flying saucer flying quickly. Morong Jun couldn't help but say with a little surprise. Just when everyone was surprised, the UFO slammed to the ground more than 10 miles away from them, just like falling from the sky. The landing was very unstable, with a bang and bumping on the ground. And unfortunately, these bumps bumped Tian, who was lying inside, down from the UFO, fell to the ground and slid out of the distance. No, the master may be hurt. Seeing this, Shenrun flashed, picked up Tian on the ground and began to check Tian's injury. The master may have been poisoned, his face blackened and his pulse weak. Shenrun explored and found that in addition to the two symptoms he said, even his breathing was very weak. At this time, many big friars gathered around and looked at Tian. Sure enough, at a glance, Tian in Shenrun's arms, as Shenrun said, his face became darker and darker, and the fluctuation between his chest and abdomen became weaker and weaker. I have an antidote pill here. Even if it's not good, it can't be bad. Yen Yunyang gestured, took a green pill from Shumi Ring and directly sent it to Tian's mouth. However, after taking the pill for more than 10 seconds, they found that Tian not only didn't get any better, but also his face was getting darker and darker, as if the poison potential was deeper. At this time, the martial spirit puppets brought by Tian rushed out of the dark fog and fled here. After a few breaths, some powerful netherworld practitioners chased out of the netherworld fog, but they just stayed at the edge of the netherworld fog and didn't continue to chase here. Sensing this situation, Morong Jun's face changed and said, the palace master didn't even have time to put away the martial spirit puppet. He left the dark fog like this. He must have encountered an extremely urgent situation, which had led to poisoning. You can imagine that the toxicity is very vicious. The palace master is dandy. I'm afraid the poison can only be solved by the palace master himself. However, the palace master is in a coma. How can he detoxify himself? I think I'd better go back to the safe area of Huafanstone, and then worry about it. Don't be attacked by the big friars in the square-inch spirit area. Yen Yunyang looked up at the direction of the dark fog and said with worry. Hearing the speech, Shenrun didn't say a word. Holding the same in his hands, he flashed to the Huafanstone defense area. The crowd also quickly followed back. Shenrun didn't stop too much. He directly released a magic weapon cave and took the lead in. The other big friars also entered the magic weapon cave. The golden eye god carving stayed outside and did not enter the magic weapon cave. What to do? I wonder if Liao Tungwen can do something. Yen Yunyang said anxiously after entering the cave. Liao Tungwen may not have a way. Tian, who had been put on the ground by Shenrun, said with his eyes closed. Is there any way? I have to try. Having just said this, Yen Yunyang suddenly realized something, hurriedly looked at Tian and said in a hurry, Palace Master, can you speak? Yi Tian suddenly opened his eyes, turned back and stood up, smiled and said, "Do I say I can't speak?" "Ah, Palace Master, so you're not poisoned?" Yan Yunyang looked relaxed. The liquid milk opened her mouth and spit out the green pill Yan Yunyang gave him. She smiled again and said, "Did the Palace Master say that he was poisoned?" As soon as they said this, everyone's heart was completely relieved. In this situation, they could guess that the so-called poisoning was deliberately pretended by Yi Tian, and it was very similar. Even they, the great friars of Yupu territory, were deceived. The palace leader will never pretend to be poisoned for no reason. There must be a great secret. Therefore, everyone looked at Yi Tian and waited for the following. Yi Tian glanced at the people, went straight to the chair of the main seat and sat down. Then he waved his hand and let them all sit down. Then he opened his mouth and said, "This time, when I entered the dark fog, I found a sinister means of Mingxiu, that is, they use bones to nourish the dark poison. This kind of dark poison should be very vicious. If you encounter this kind of dark poison, the consequences may be very serious. I didn't expect the Ming clan to be so vicious, but it's wrong to use this kind of Ming poison against the palace leader. By the way, the palace leader, did you not encounter the poison or take the antidote pill?" Morong Jun said. Yi Tian shook his head slightly and said, "I also pretended to be poisoned immediately after I found this poison. I haven't studied that poison carefully. Only after studying how to solve this poison can I know. Now let's talk about why I pretend to be poisoned. If the Hades know that I am not poisoned, they may be desperate to deal with me in this way. They would rather pay a great price and send a large number of Hades or friars in the spirit area to do harm everywhere just to distract the attention of the Maitreya palace. While the other Hades in the fog once all go out, to tell the truth, it's really impossible to prevent. However, once Mingxiu suspects that I am poisoned, no matter how much suspicion, they can't be sure whether I am really poisoned. They won't take the lead in fighting against the people, but first determine whether I am poisoned. If I am poisoned, whether I have fallen. After all, the soul oath made by the monks of Fengsuan spiritual region in Mingxiu is based on the collapse of the Maitreya palace. If they can be sure that I'm dead, they'll start at the Maitreya palace. First get rid of our thorn, and then the Earth Star won't do whatever they want? What the palace master said is really reasonable. If the Maitreya palace is not destroyed all day, the friars in Fengsuan spirit domain must obey the command of Mingxiu in battle. I think this is the most helpless choice of the friars in Fengsuan spirit domain. Therefore, what they are most eager to do is to determine the life and death of the palace master, and then do other things." Yan Yunyang nodded slightly. Murongjun knew about the soul cultivation oath between the friar of Fengsuan spirit region and the ghost, and the specific goals and conditions. Naturally, Murongjun knew it through soul-searching Zhao Tianhu. Yi Tian continued, "So I'm going to use their mentality to ambush them again. The reason why the friars of the netherworld and Fengsuan spirit domain haven't taken action up to now is that they haven't finally determined whether I'm dead. What we have to do is to withdraw to the Thin Line Theater immediately, and then make a decision according to the reaction of the friars of the netherworld and Fengsuan spirit domain. And I also need some time to study the dark poison of the Hades. Then prepare an antidote. After all, our people are likely to be poisoned by this poison in the future. If possible, you can take the antidote for immunity to this dark poison in advance, so you won't be timid if you really start. We obey the arrangement of the palace master. As for the ambush mentioned by the palace master just now, please show it to the palace master." Yan Yunyang said immediately after hearing Yi Tian say so. Yi Tian Dao, now, whether it's the friars in Fengsuan spiritual realm or the practitioners in the netherworld, I'm not sure if I'm really poisoned. It's no exaggeration to say that there should be at least a few divine thoughts covering here. Every move here and any disturbance are under the surveillance of the other party. The biggest threat to us is not the practitioners in the netherworld, but the friars in Fengsuan spiritual realm. Therefore, we should eradicate Fengsuan spirit. The great friar of Yupu territory is the first priority. Next, I'll arrange an ambush. Yes. When Yi Tian said this, they immediately stood up. At this time, Yi Tian looked around and said slowly, "Shan Run, give Tian Luonet to Tan Suching. Yan Yunyang, give Ho Yi's Bao to Yan Zhongkai. Erase all the signs of God and let them recognize the Lord. Yes, Master. Yes, Palace Master. Xianran and Yan Yunyang promised, and immediately took out the Tian Luonet and Hoi Bao and handed them to the two big friars in Yupu territory designated by Yi Tian. Yi Tian looked at Xianran and Yan Yunyang and said, "You should understand some of my plans?" Xianran immediately said, "The old slave understood a little. These two strange treasures have changed their masters now. The big friars in the square-inch spirit domain must have never thought of them. They will only think that the two treasures are still in the hands of Master Yin and I, and will mainly pay attention to the movements of both of us. Therefore, the whereabouts of Taoist friends Yin Zhongkai and Tan Suching will not attract too much attention." "Yes, that's basically what I mean." Yi Tian smiled, nodded, and said to Yin Zhongkai and Tan Su, "Now you recognize the Lord. I will continue to arrange the ambush plan." As he spoke, Yi Tian gestured and took out dozens of sets of fixed body beads. This object is called fixed body beads. 3 round beads or 1. "Xianran, you are invisible now." Xianran immediately flashed and disappeared in the Dharma cave. Yi Tian gestured and hit a set of fixed body beads with mana. The fixed body beads immediately soared into the air and formed a triangle in the cave space. They interacted with each other and gave out a misty light, while Xianran's body shape was undoubtedly revealed in the white light. Yi Tian put away the body-fixing beads and looked at the crowd. This is another magic weapon to break the invisibility. Now that the powder has been exposed, the friars in Fengsuan spirit domain will certainly find a way to deal with it, so the next time to break the other party's invisibility, we will use this kind of body-fixing beads. Our palace master arranged the Tiangong division to refine a large number of body-fixing beads and light-gathering powder to break the invisibility. One is to be used in the self-cultivation in Fengsuan spirit domain, and the other is to do it allocate regular resources to disciples to avoid encountering invisible friars at any time in the future. Now take some of them separately, but don't give them to disciples for the time being. Keep them on your back. When to give them, just listen to my arrangement." As he spoke, Yi Tian took out more than 300 sets of body-fixing beads, put them on the ground and said, "Each big monk takes 10 sets, the temple division takes 200 sets, the temple division 2 takes 100 sets, and the rest will be distributed by the master of the palace." Yan Yunyang and Morangjun immediately started and took the number of fixed body beads allocated by Yi Tian. Next, the leader of the palace and Yin Zhongkai and Tan Suching left the cave. When I left the cave, I immediately organized my disciples to evacuate here. I don't need to pay attention to the Huafan stone defense area for the time being. Yu Yan paid attention to the situation of the Huafan stone defense area. If Mingxiu came to collect it, I don't need to pay attention. If Mingxiu from Fengsuan spirit area came to collect it, I'll wait for an opportunity to kill it in the middle of the collection. Mainly the purpose of this is to bring in the great friars of Yupu territory from Fengsuan spiritual region. After the previous lessons, they should be very cautious. You can change the rest as you need. Do you understand? Yi Tian arranged one by one, then looked at them and asked. "I see," the people said one after another. It can be said that the plan of Dante is very good. The good thing is to make the big friars in Fengsuan spirit domain defenseless. It is estimated that this time, unless they don't show up, I'm afraid they will have to break off some big teeth once they show up. Okay, then act immediately. Yan Zhongkai and Tan Suching follow me into the ground then, Yi Tian gestured and took out the 5 elements of beads. With a gentle urging of magic power, Yi Tian sent out a faint light within a square meter. Then Yi Tian's body slowly sank from the bottom of the magic weapon cave. Yan Zhongkai and Tan Suching dared not neglect and immediately followed. With the faint yellow halo disappearing underground, Yi Tian, Yan Zhongkai and Tan Suching have completely disappeared from the magic weapon cave. Lord Morong, let's take action too. Yan Yunyang nodded to Morong Jun, and 6 big friars in the magic weapon cave walked out of the magic weapon cave one after another. Xianran was the last to come out of the magic weapon cave. He stared at the cave deeply inside. A spell hit the magic weapon cave and put it away. In this way, it seems that the essence of the play is attached to the body, which is difficult to distinguish between true and false. At this time, at the edge of the fog sea, 10 big friars of Yupu territory in the square-inch spirit domain were opening their minds and exploring the situation of Huafan Stone Defense Zone. An old man with a few wisps of white beard stroked his beard, frowned slightly, narrowed his eyes, sensed the situation there and said nothing. "You Taoist friends, what do you think of this matter? Is that ye naively poisoned?" a female nun in Yupu territory nearby asked. The old man is Yuling, the ancestor of the Temple of Light, and the female nun is Mrs. Xu Mei's sister in Hualing Valley. Mrs. Bai Mei. After Mrs. Xu Mei fell, Mrs. Bai Mei took charge of Hualing Valley. Hearing Mrs. Bai Mei's inquiry, Yuling said in silence for a moment, "The nature of Yi Tian of the Dan Emperor has changed greatly. Although his accomplishments are far from what they used to be, he is much more cruel and crafty than before." The demon emperor of the underworld of the Ming clan said that the bone-possessed ghost poison is very domineering, and it costs a lot of money to cultivate it in the underworld, so he can't use it easily. He will only take it out when the underworld is facing life and death. Yi Tian only needs its flesh and blood, so there's no reason not to be poisoned. However, we've suffered a great loss from Yi Tian, which led to the fall of 5 great friars in Yupu territory. We can't afford the loss. If we continue like this, I'm afraid we. Yuling said this, sighed gently, still let go of his mind, and observed the situation of the 300-mile outer Huafan Stone Defense Area. Why did you need it at the beginning? Jopine Phoenix Nirvana didn't get it and made a big feud with Yi Tian. I'm afraid no one could imagine today. Now all sects have suffered heavy losses. You're afraid that Yi Tian might be poisoned. Don't you regret it until he detoxifies? He was once the Dante? Mrs. Bai Mei murmured. He didn't name his name, but the people next to him couldn't help frowning. Mrs. Xu Mei of Hualing Valley was also involved in this matter at the beginning. Don't tell anyone. I only said that Yi Tian was estimated to be versatile and should be cautious. I didn't say no. Now there are 9 people entering the cave, and only 3 come out. Yan Zhongkai of the temple and Tan Suching of Shuiwei sect have stayed in the cave. Are they taking care of the poisoned Yi Tian? Or are there other schemes? We can't decide at all, I know, but now we've all been broken. I've explored it. Maybe it will take 2 or 3 days for this powder to lose its effect. We can't act rashly until the invisibility is restored. Yuling snorted coldly. But if he's not dead now, who can guarantee that he can't refine pills and detoxify himself? Besides, Mrs. Xu Mei was involved in the matter in Walingu at that time, and it had nothing to do with me. Why should I tie him in? Bai Meifu said with emotion. Taoist friend Bai Mei, you're baffled. After Yi Tian came out of Wanling Valley, didn't Hualing Valley also have a lot of fun to arrest Yi Tian? Send disciples to Earth Star. Without you, Hualing Valley, you vow to kill Yi Tian yourself, but now when you arrive at Earthstar, you find that Yi Tian is growing too fast. Are you afraid? Now you're with Ming. The clan has made a soul oath. No one here can run away. Hualing disciple basically had no loss in the war just now. Now it's time for you to contribute. Yuling snorted coldly. It's the matter of the 8 sections. Why should Hualing Valley come out alone? It's luck to lose a lot or a little before. It's not Hualing Valley's avoidance of war or Hualing Valley's lack of help. Yi Tian chose the group of disciples of the Temple of Light to attack. Maybe it's because he hates you. Mrs. Bai Mei said coldly, the disciples of Hualing Valley did not lose much in the previous war, because their team was lucky that they were not attacked by Yi Tian. Well, now that the enemy is in front of us, let's not have any internal disputes. I think the most important thing now is to confirm what the condition of Yi Tian is. Is he poisoned? If he is poisoned, what kind of poison potential is it? Only by confirming this, can we arrange relevant coping strategies, right? Another middle-aged monk interrupted. This person is Tong Nan, the ancestor of Xingyu and Dong Tian. What Taoist friend Tong said is very true. However, now Xianran and Yan Yunyang are in the team, and they retreat very carefully. They seem to be on guard very strictly. Who can get close to those 2 powerful magic weapons? If they don't get close, how can they find out the real situation? Yuling glanced at Tong Nan and said with a frown. Tong Nan glanced at the fog and said, Tong has an idea. As you can see, fighting in the Maitreya Palace depends on the black sand that can suppress mana. We can test it and send disciples to take away the sand. If Tian is not poisoned, it must be their poison. When our disciples are collecting the black sand, they will suddenly move back and kill our brother's son. So, we'll arrange people to prepare a counterattack nearby. If someone comes back from the Maitreya Palace, we can kill him with all our strength. If no one comes back, we can take the black sand there. Is the black sand tens of miles around so easy to collect? Yuling seems to disapprove of this practice. After saying that, he won't say more. The rest of the big friars in Yupu didn't speak. For a moment, the scene was quiet. I think we'd better wait and die. There are 8 sects with 8 hearts. Some sects originally have private grievances and go their own ways. Although they are united on the surface, when they really need to work together, they all keep their own thoughts and save their strength. Dead Taoist friends don't die poor. Such an alliance is a mob. How can they fight with the ordered and forbidden Mira Palace? A moment later, the old ancestor of Dansha Blessed Land was Kinganping and sighed leisurely. No one spoke. Who can say anything? That's the case. Who doesn't want to kill Yi Tian and preserve his strength in this war? Who wants to start a war in order to survive and die first in the war? The 5 fallen great friars in Yupu territory are a good example. If they know the result, they would rather leave Fengsuan's spiritual domain and practice incognito in other spiritual domains alone. They would rather ignore their own sect than end up with the destruction of form and spirit here. But now, if they were still in the spirit realm, they might make such a choice. But now, they have come to the Earth Star and made a soul oath with the Hades. If they don't help the Hades destroy Yi Tian, they can't leave here. If they break the oath, they will be bitten by the vicious soul oath. In other words, they have been kidnapped by the Pluto and have no other room. The stealth method they got from the Hades didn't seem to have any effect, so it was easily broken by the people in the Maitreya Palace. When I heard that I could practice invisibility, my hot mood dropped to the freezing point. According to the meaning of Qingdao friends, what should I do? Yuling didn't refute his words, but asked on a case-by-case basis. Kinganping wrote, I've always been focused on those people of Yin Yunyang, and I haven't found any suspicious phenomenon. Yi Tian, Yen Zhongkai and Tan Suqing have never been released by Shenrun. You can do it now, whether it's tempting or collecting black sand. No matter who was killed or injured in each sect, you can send people on average. The rest of the Taoist friends of Yupu territory can protect them nearby. I'm focused on fix those people. Once we find that Yin Yunyang and Shenrun disappear out of thin air and use the great move technique, we will be ready to kill them at the moment they transmit them. In this way, the other party must have no power to fight back. You just need to pay attention to the fluctuation of aura in the sky. If no one comes back, it may prove that Yi Tian is indeed poisoned. We just take the black sand and study the way to crack it. Okay, I agree. Mrs. Bai Mei took the lead in saying that the average manpower means that Hualing Valley doesn't need too many manpower. Some other friars in Yupu territory thought about it and thought that this method was safe and had no opinion, so they agreed one after another. Half an hour later, a large group of monks in the square-inch spirit domain quickly flew out of the dark fog and headed for the Huafan stone defense area. There are 16,000 people in this team, with an average of 8 sects, each of which has 2,000 disciples. The 10 great friars of Yupu territory then flew very carefully to the area near the Huafan stone area. They were all ready. While releasing their mind and observing the situation of the friars of Yin Yunyang's team, they watched around warily, as if they were afraid of the sudden emergence of Yupu territory out of thin air. A moment later, the 10 great friars in Yupu territory sensed that the team of the Maitreya Palace had returned to the war zone on the western front and began to arrange defense. Shenrun also took out the magic weapon cave, and those great friars in Yupu territory entered the magic weapon cave one after another. Qingdaoyu, this situation shows that Yi Tian is indeed poisoned. The people who watch the temple and Shueiyue sect are very nervous. Go in and have a look. Shall we go and make a sneak attack? At this time, Yuling sent a message to Qing'anping's mind not far away. Qing'anping shook his head and said, fellow travelers, don't you see that the people in the Maitreya Palace are arranging a large number of black sands? It seems that they will defend here for a long time. It's not suitable for us to sneak attack now. First, we are suppressed by the black sands. Second, we haven't recovered our invisibility, which will increase the danger. Therefore, the most important thing now is to study and understand the ways to crack the black sands, and then recover invisibility. Although the other party has a way to break invisibility, that way is not impossible to prevent. But we didn't expect this powder to exist at that time, so we were caught off guard. Qing Daoyu is thoughtful and admired by you. I don't know if Qing Daoyu thought of a way to crack that powder. Yu Ling nodded slightly. Xing Anping said while observing the surroundings with vigilance, the method is very simple, but it is difficult to be invisible without being cracked at all. When invisible, the invisible person gathers a layer of earth armor with magic power. Even if there is medicine powder falling, it can only fall on the earth armor. However, in an instant, the invisible person can shatter the earth armor by himself, so that there will be no medicine powder falling on the body, and he can be invisible again. Just the moment he is forced to be invisible enough to protect yourself, the rest is not a problem. It's still Chang Dao's thoughtful, and it's really a good way. Yu Ling heard the speech, and a layer of earth armor appeared on his body. Then the mana shook, and the earth armor scattered and flew everywhere. Although there was no invisible powder, he realized that this method was simple, feasible, and effective, so he nodded and said, this is not my original idea, but a method I found together with several others. With this method, all the disciples will be proficient in the practice of invisibility after a while. At that time, where can I go? Ha ha ha. Speaking of this, Xing Anping suddenly moved, but before he flew away, a black light came out of thin air, and with a bang, Xing Anping's body exploded out of thin air. Suddenly, Yu Ling was surprised. He was about to perform a large movement to leave here. Before he could move, he suddenly felt that his body was tight and had been bound by a big net. Then a light flashed in front of him and fell into permanent darkness. Almost at the same time, Mrs. Bai Mei of Hualing Valley was repairing with another middle-aged man, back-to-back guarding against the front and rear directions. Suddenly, they heard the movement over Kingdonping. When they just turned their heads to watch, they suddenly felt their bodies coagulate and a huge shadow appeared on their heads out of thin air. This huge shadow is naturally the mountain and river seal of Yi Tian. Originally, Yi Tian came with Tan Suqing and Yan Zhongkai, but as a mobile force, he acted according to circumstances and had no intention of making a move. He is also ready to continue pretending to be poisoned, so as to confuse the friars in Fengsuan spirit domain. He had this idea because he didn't expect that all the big friars in the square-inch spirit domain came to the Huafan stone defense area at one time, and the defense was above the sky, not behind. How could he let go of such a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? The big friar of Yupu territory in Fengsuan Lingyu kingdom has one less threat, but he is ready to kill the other 4 big friars of Yupu territory at one time. When the Tathagata comes, there are only 6 big friars of Yupu territory in the 8 sects of Fengsuan Lingyu kingdom. It's enough to stare at one person on his own side. Naturally, the pressure is greatly reduced. Therefore, he spoke to Tan Suqing and Yan Zhongkai, making them invisible and sneaking to the most favorable raid position, while he came to Mrs. Bai Mei. When all 3 were ready, they suddenly shot at the same time. Yan Zhongkai and Tan Suqing performed their own feats at almost the same time, killing Yu Ling and Xing Anping, while Mrs. Bai Mei and another great friar were crushed by Yi Tian's Shanhian town. In the distance, the 6 big friars in the spirit area were alert when Yi Tian-san started to move, and they left here at the first time, even ignoring the disciples in the Huafan stone area. Under the imprint of mountains and rivers, Yi Tian emerged. However, on the surface, Yi Tian's appearance at this time is not his true face. He has changed into another big monk in Yupu territory. That person is the changeable devil, Yu Yan. However, he appeared as a changeable devil, but in a breath, he changed back to his true face again. It seemed that in a short time, the 2 looks flashed and relocked in Yi Tian's appearance. After Yi Tian made this confused move, he directly took out the fierce soldier flying sword, cleanly killed Mrs. Bai Mei and another big monk in Yupu territory, then learned Yu Yan's rough voice, laughed a few times, and took the 2 Zumaji away. Then, many square-inch spirit realm disciples who drove the mountains and rivers to the Huafan stone defense area smashed them down. On the other hand, Yan Zhongkai and Tan Suqing also used their means to kill the friars of Fengsuan spiritual region below. This is a massacre of absolute high-level friars against low-level friars, and low-level friars can't even exert their two manas under the suppression of Huafan stone. Almost a moment ago, 16,000 monks of the 8 sects of the square-inch spirit domain were killed. Immediately, Yan Zhongkai gestured and released magic weapons. The disciples of the temple branch of the Maitreya palace swarmed out to clean the battlefield. At the edge of the dark fog, the only 6 big friars in Yupu territory who were left in the 8 sects of Fengsuan Lingyu domain stood there with a blue face. They were careful to guard against the surroundings in fear, while thinking about the defense area of Huafan stone. The look on the face of each big monk in Yupu territory was very ugly. Some even kept beating their cheeks. Anger erupted in their eyes and their fists clattered. However, these great friars in Yupu territory can only watch our disciples being slaughtered, and then the other party cleans the battlefield calmly, but they dare not go out of the dark fog, let alone revenge, even if they show up outside. The attack just now was so terrible that it was impossible to prevent. Now everyone knows that Yan Yunyang is still Yan Yunyang and Xianrun is still Xianrun. They did go with the team, but the 2 magic weapons in their hands were transferred to Yan Zhongkai and Tan Suqing. But is Yi Tian still Yi Tian? Yu Yen appeared and immediately became the situation of Yi Tian. They all saw it clearly through divine induction. However, which is true, which is false, Yu Yen or Yi Tian, these big friars in Yupu territory are confused. The 6 square-inch monks in the spirit realm Jade and Pu realm who were bleeding in their hearts were secretly planning and angrily observing each other's cleaning the battlefield. Soon, the other party had cleaned the battlefield. Even the bodies of the disciples of the 8 sects were not disposed of, so they were thrown in such a mess, and the disciples of the Maitreya palace who cleaned the battlefield returned to the magic weapon cave. At this time, the big friars in the square-inch spirit realm and Jade and Pu realm at the edge of the dark fog paid attention to the situation there. Within the scope of divine thoughts, after the disciples of the Maitreya palace entered the magic weapon cave, Yan Zhongkai hit the magic weapon cave with a magic power. The magic weapon cave quickly became smaller, and then Yan Zhongkai was included in Shumi Ring. Then Yan Zhongkai waved his hand, and Tan Suqing and Yi Tian followed and flew away. It should not be Yu Yen, it should be Yi Tian. If it was Yu Yen, they should use the big move instead of flying back. They were worried about exposing the fact that Yi Tian wouldn't use the big move, so Yan Zhongkai and Tan Suqing didn't use the big move, but flew with him to cover. A white monk pondered and analyzed. However, if Yi Tian is the leader of the Maitreya palace, why should Yan Zhongkai send the signal? I think that the man should be Yu Yen posing as Yi Tian. They were used to this reaction and ignored the details of who was the leader for a while, so the details determined the success or failure. They exposed the fact that Yi Tian had an accident. And the magic weapon of the Big Seal has changed its owner and changed it is used by the changeable devil. You Taoist friends should know who is the most suitable to pretend to be Yi Tian. Naturally, it is the changeable devil. He often appears in different looks, which is well known. Another old man nearby said. The white monk shook his head and said, I don't think so. If Yu Yen changed, I should be able to feel the clues of the change, but now I can't feel it at all? The old man immediately retorted, the reason why Yu Yen is called the versatile devil is naturally because his skill of change is very clever and can reveal clues. If everyone can distinguish the true from the false, he will not be the versatile devil. Where are they? During the debate, the big monk with white face was suddenly surprised. Just now, he only focused on analyzing the situation with the old man. At this time, he found that Yan Zhongkai, Tan Suqing, and the monk who didn't know whether it was Yu Yen or Yi Tian had disappeared from his mind. They all moved away. A big monk with a gloomy look said softly. He was the second ancestor of the Temple of Light. He was very depressed because of the fall of Yuling, but he did see the departure of the 3 people in the Maitreya palace. It's impossible. That man is Yi Tian. How could he have left by performing a great move? The white-faced monk shook his head and said. It's impossible, Du Dao Yu. See for yourself. Look at the camp on the west line of the Maitreya palace. The old man who debated with him before snorted with disdain. The white-faced monk quickly released his mind and covered the western camp of the Maitreya palace. but he was stunned to find that Yen Zhongkai, Tan Suqing, and the monk with Yi Tian's appearance could not confirm their identity at the top of the camp, and the aura ripples after everyone's great movement had not completely dissipated. This situation just shows where the three have just arrived after a big move. Ah! The white-faced monk surnamed Du was stunned and couldn't speak. The fact was put in front of him. What the old man said was to treat him. That person was Yu Yan, otherwise Yi Tian couldn't perform the great movement. Well, I'm right. Yi Tian does have a problem. That person is Yu Yan, the old man said coldly at this time. Now it seems that it should be Yu Yan, but Yi Tian doesn't know what's going on now. We have to discuss it well. We can't make any mistakes anymore. Otherwise, all our 8 sects will be destroyed and fall into a situation of eternal disaster. The white-faced friar finally admitted that his was wrong, and said after a little meditation, "It's time to have a good discussion. Now there are only 6 great friars in Yupu territory left. Even if Yi Tian dies, we can't leave the Earth Star until we destroy the Maitreya Palace. This is a soul oath. We can't be careless. However, even if there is any action, all disciples need to be proficient in hermit cultivation, so that we can attack and defend when we enter and retreat, and we can have more capital to protect our lives," said the old man. At this time, the ethereal voice suddenly sounded in the dark fog. "I didn't expect you human friars to be useless. I'll give you half a month. After half a month, cooperate with the Ming family to launch a comprehensive attack, and the victory or defeat is in one fell swoop." Half a month is a little hasty. The Emperor of the Underworld, the old man said with a frown. "I can only give you half a month. At that time, the troop mobilization of the Underworld has been completed. You can't wait any longer. Since Yi Tian has a problem, what are you afraid of? Do you want to break the soul oath?" the voice continued. Then the voice fell silent. In the Western Front war zone, Yi Tian landed and entered the magic weapon cave with Yen Zhongkai and Tan Suqing. This performance, the perfect end. "Palace Master, it's really gratifying to win this time." Several big friars in Yupu territory in the cave quickly got up and bowed their hands to congratulate. "It's really a complete victory. This expedition has achieved its goal and killed 9 great friars of the 8 great sects, which greatly reduces the pressure in the future. However, the friars of Mingxiu and the 8 great sects will launch an all-round attack in half a month. We should make good use of this half a month to make good preparations," Yi Tian said with a smile. "Will a full-scale attack be launched in half a month? Palace Master, is the news reliable?" Yen Yunyang saw Yen Zhongkai and Tan Suqing's confused look on their faces. She immediately knew that the 2 people didn't know the news, so she wondered. Such confidential information is easily unavailable. The news is reliable. Moreover, Ningxiu and Fangsuan Spirit Domain really believes that something has happened to me, and we should make good use of it at the same time," Yi Tian continued. Of course, he can't hear the voice thousands of miles away, but in the dark fog, there is his heart-connecting worm. From everyone's mouth, he can naturally get the content of his speech. Moreover, even if you can't hear what the nihilistic voice said, you can infer from the old man's answer. At this time, Yen Zhongkai and Tan Suqing still feel inexplicable. Therefore, they have always been with Yi Tian, but up to now, they still don't know how Yi Tian learned these news. They were puzzled. Yi Tian continued, "Mingxiu must be well prepared for this decisive battle. We must not take it lightly. For this battle, I make the following arrangements." Hearing that the palace master was ready to deal with it, the people immediately looked solemn and listened carefully. Yi Tiandao said, "A half-month of meditation is a month and a half for our Maitreya Palace. In these 2.5 months, except for the disciples performing the task, everyone else must practice in the magic weapon cave in the field of 5 times the time. After this meeting, each division will distribute 2 to 3 magic weapons cave in the field of 5 times the time. In addition, the great friars of Yupu territory should also improve their strength during this period. Some time ago, I took some time to refine some pills to assist the great friars of Yupu territory. Each person will be given 2 pills." As he spoke, Yi Tian gestured again and again, and a beautiful jade bottle appeared in front of each big monk in Yupu territory. The people thanked and took it with joy. they all knew how precious the pill refined by Emperor Dan was. In addition, all friars above the golden elixir realm are given 2 pills to assist cultivation. They must be consumed in these 2.5 months. The Maitreya Palace is not short of pills, but only requires the disciples of each cultivation realm to improve their skills. Yi Tian continued, during this period of time, Tiangong branch will focus on refining martial soul puppets and try its best to refine them. Our Maitreya Palace is not short of the best fairy jade. After that, Yi Tian looked at Yu Yan. Yu Yan, I will be invisible and leave here. During my departure, you will change into me to confuse Ming Xiu. Will the palace master leave? Morong Jun asked in surprise. Yi Tian nodded slightly and said, yes, I have to leave. This war is a decisive battle with Mingxiu in the Fog Sea. In order to prevent Mingxiu from sending reinforcements from far away, I will go deep into the Fog Sea alone, close all the entrances to the underworld, and cut off the reinforcement path of Mingxiu. The palace leader can take more people, or it's too dangerous to be alone. Yan Yunyang hurriedly advised. Yi Tian shook his head and said, it doesn't hurt. Now Mingxiu starts to use Ming poison. I haven't had time to deal with it. It's too dangerous for others to enter. Moreover, with my invisibility, it shouldn't be too difficult to do it. Everyone knows that what Yi Tian decides will not be changed easily, so they won't say more. After the simple arrangement, Yi Tian went out of the magic weapon cave, released a lot of magic weapons in turn, and went to Taisho branch and Tiangong branch. Duan Jingxiu came to arrange the distribution of cave and pill. As a result, most of the day has passed. Everything has been arranged. Yi Tian enters the magic weapon cave again. At this time, there is only Yu Yan in the cave. For the sake of prudence, when Yi Tian appeared, Yu Yan could not appear at the same time. Yi Tian knew that the big friar in Fengsuan spirit domain was probably not completely at ease. He would always check the movement here and distinguish whether he was alive or not through some details. He does not need the full confirmation of those people, as long as they are skeptical, even if the goal is achieved. In the cave, Yi Tian confessed to Yu Yan, took out the 5 element beads and hid underground. Until he fled thousands of miles, Yi Tian Kai found a hidden place, flew out of the ground, drove the fierce soldier's flying sword, and remained invisible to the west. Half an hour later, he came to the periphery of a vast black fog. This is the Fog Sea where the third entrance to the underworld is located. Without a moment's pause, Yi Tian went straight to use earth hiding technique. After reaching hundreds of the feet underground, he took out 5 element beads and celestial shuttle and flew away to center of the Fog Sea. Every time he flies away for a distance, Yi Tian stops. Yuan Tian's eyes shine through, observes the situation in the Fog Sea, and then continues to fly away. Like the Fog Sea before, there are many meditation in the Fog Sea here, and the number is also extremely amazing. Moreover, it is a part of what Yi Tian can observe. Yi Tian can't confirm how many nether practices there are. It seems that more preparations have to be made. At present, Yi Tian has no time to pay attention to those nether practices and continues to fly forward. His only purpose is to block the entrance of the nether world. The nether chi gurgles out from the entrance of the underworld. The most obvious feature of looking for the underworld is to see where the dark fog is the strongest. According to this condition, Yi Tian flew underground to the place with rich dark fog. It didn't take long for Yi Tian to see some very strange terrain in the deep dark fog in the distance. Originally, this is a plain area with extremely flat terrain, but that terrain is very strange. Many different peaks rise, like a stone forest, standing facing the sky. In this stone forest, there are countless meditation practitioners wandering around, as if guarding this stone forest. Deep in the stone forest, there was a strong dark spirit rising into the sky and rolling into the surrounding dark fog. Yes, it should be the entrance to the underworld, but the thick stone forest extends to the entrance direction and can't see the end at a glance. Yi Tian frowned and pondered. Originally, he thought that after finding the entrance to the underworld here, as in the last Fog Sea, he would press the entrance of the underworld with Huafan Stone Town, not only to prevent the continuous influx of the underworld fog, but also to prevent the underworld repair from entering the Fog Sea from the underworld. However, the terrain he saw immediately made him realize that this idea would not work. Even if Huathan stones are put down, they can't be closed and covered up with the support of these stone forests. They still leave a very huge gap, which is equivalent to no blocking. In this case, the only way is to use the mountain and river seal. Even if you smash it, you should smash the entrance of the underworld, and then put down the Huathan stone. In that way, wouldn't you want to expose your identity and make a lot of noise? With this in mind, Tian drives the UFO to dive to the ground. When it is more than 10 meters away from the ground, he hits the UFO with his magic power, which quickly reduces the UFO's income from Zumaji. Tian's eyes shone through and found a hidden position that could return to the ground. He quietly disappeared from the earth. When a patrol of Mingxiu passed by, he moved and was already in the dark fog. After carefully observing the surrounding situation, he began to sneak carefully towards the entrance of the rolling dark fog. With his mind's mastery of invisibility and control over the five-element Taoism, he would not attract any attention of the dark cultivation. What surprised him was that there were a lot of meditation outside the stone forest that protected the entrance of the underworld, but he couldn't see any meditation at the entrance of the underworld fog. This is a very abnormal situation. Since Mingxiu has made preparations to prevent himself from blocking the entrance of the underworld, there must be no reason not to deploy heavy troops at the entrance of the underworld. Obviously, these stone pillars can't stop the smashing of mountain and river seals. Why do they arrange such a stone forest? Tian quickly thought about this problem in his mind. Because he mistakenly entered the Nining enchanting field in the fog sea last time, if Morong did not quickly break the boundary of the field, if he was trapped for too long, I'm afraid it would delay the event. Tian naturally learned the lesson of that time. Some methods of the Ming clan are too defenseless. You must be cautious and cautious. Tian's eyes shone through, and Tian looked around a little carefully. He didn't find any invisible nether cultivation, nor did he find the invisible square-inch spiritual region friar. Until this time, he still did not act rashly, but continued to observe carefully with Tian's eyes, from the ground to the ground. When Tianyan looked underground, his eyes suddenly coagulated and found that countless bodies were buried at a depth of about 1 foot underground. He looked a little and suddenly found that these bodies were buried around the entrance of the underworld with a radius of dozens of mu in front, with a width of about 10 feet and a thickness of about 1 meter. How many people must be killed before these bodies can appear? When Tian saw the corpse, his eyes almost burst out anger, and his heart increased his endless hatred for Mingxiu. No. When Tian looked at the bodies carefully, he suddenly understood why there were so many bodies here. Because Tian's eyes shone through, he looked inside the corpses. Among those corpses, he found purple and gold runes, and there was a purple and gold rune in each corpse. Naturally, every corpse with purple and gold runes was the flesh and bone of the Hades. Those purple and gold runes are hidden in the corpse. If Tian didn't have the source eye, he would never be able to see them. So it is Tian is naturally very clear about the explosive power of purple gold runes. Tian's strong body is naturally not afraid of the explosion of 1 or 2 flesh bones, but so many flesh bones explode together? If that's true, I'm afraid Tian won't feel too well under such a violent explosion. Up to now, Tian finally understood the use of those stone forests. The fundamental purpose of the existence of those strong stones is definitely not to prevent themselves from blocking the entrance to the underworld, because these stone forests can't do it at all. The meaning of their existence is to tie themselves near the entrance of the underworld so that they will not secretly block the entrance of the underworld and then sneak away. If you want to block the entrance of the underworld, you must break open those stone forests, break open the stone forests, and flatten all the entrances of the underworld. It will not only take a lot of time, but also make a lot of noise. Then he controls the nether cultivation of these flesh bones, explodes these flesh bones, and kills himself at the entrance of the underworld. Of course, maybe now Mingxiu thought he was dead, but this arrangement could not be completed in 1 or 2 days. At that time, he thought he made it when he was alive. To understand this, Tian said in secret that it was dangerous. Once, he wanted to send 5 great friars from Yupu territory of the Maitreya palace to block the entrance of the underworld at the same time. The advantage of doing so is that the 5 fog seas are carried out at the same time, which does not give the response and prevention time of the underworld, and has an unexpected effect. However, considering the existence of dark poison, Tian doesn't care, but other great friars in Yupu territory may not be able to resist. Therefore, after careful consideration, he decided to give a certain preparation time to the Fog Sea and other places and go to block it himself. Unexpectedly, he has a lot of cards, which is enough to deal with all kinds of situations. Now it seems that I'm lucky to have done so, otherwise I would have changed to other great friars in Yupu territory. If Mingxiu detonated these flesh and bones at the same time, I'm afraid even the great friars in Yupu territory would fall. After discovering this, Yi Tian's body flashed, quietly sneaked into the ground, came to a safe place deep underground, and began to meditate. These flesh bones are double-edged swords. They can detonate by themselves and also by Mingxiu. It mainly depends on how to use them. If you directly detonate these flesh bones, you can naturally flatten all the stone forests without smashing them with mountain and river seals. However, if you detonate them in such a plain way and don't pull a few cushions, does it seem that these flesh bones are too lonely? A moment later, a cold smile appeared on his lips. Then he motioned and took out a dragon armor from Shumi Ring. In order to protect the master's body, this dragon armor is completely closed from head to foot. After Yi Tian quickly recognized the master, the body has been shrouded in this layer of dragon armor. Then, as soon as the mana urged, the armor clothing integrated into the body, disappeared, and half a trace can no longer be seen. Then, he took out one again and continued to wear it on his body. Anyway, the dragon armor integrated into his body will never look bloated because of how many pieces he wore. Even if he wore 10,000 pieces, how thin he should be. Yi Tian wore 10 black dragon armor in succession, and then he stopped. In addition to the 3 pieces he used to wear, his dragon armor has reached as many as 13 pieces, and the treasure clothes made of cold sky silk. Now he can be called an armored monk. Yi Tian has carefully studied this dragon armor, which can counteract 60% of the enemy's attack, but when wearing 2, the second one can still counteract 60% of the 40% mana of the attack, and so on. Like Yi Tian, even if the Great Friar in Tiangong did it, he would be protected by the dragon armor layer by layer, reducing the other party's mana. Unless the opponent uses extremely advanced magic weapons, he can cut off all these dragon armor. After being armed, Yi Tian did not directly return to the ground, but ran away from the ground and came to the periphery of the stone forest. In a remote place, he released 20 step-by-step martial spirit puppets, one after another, and killed them in the stone forest. 20 martial spirit puppets in such a state did not need defense at all. They just rushed and killed. In an instant, they killed many Mingxiu at the periphery of the stone forest and continued to rush towards the entrance of the underworld. All the Mingxiu along the way were destroyed by this torrent of steel. This is the plan Yi Tian is implementing. If Mingxiu detonates these flesh bodies and bones for these more than 20 martial soul puppets, Yi Tian will recognize them. In this way, we also avoid exposing the secret that we can detonate the flesh and bones, and those puppets are magic weapons and will not be damaged. If Mingxiu doesn't detonate the flesh and bones, he won't let the Wulin puppet destroy those stone forests. He will send Mingxiu to kill them. At that time the above 2 situations are Yi Tian's own guess. He has just made some calculations. If Mingxiu is really calm, the Wulin puppet eradicates the stone forest, then blocks the entrance of the underworld with Huafan stone, and then detonates the flesh and bones. The Huafan stone, which is also regarded as a magic weapon, is not only very strong, but also huge in volume and extremely heavy in weight. The explosive force of the flesh and bones at the edge of the entrance of the underworld will certainly not shake the Huafan stone. After all, the impact of the explosive force of the flesh attached to the bone arranged in the distance on the Huafan stone will be weakened. The plan is very good, but it depends on Mingxiu's response. Yi Tian was hidden in the dark fog somewhere far away from the stone forest. He manipulated 20 half-step spirit puppets to rush to the entrance of the underworld. There was no stopping Mingxiu here. The martial spirit puppet began to wave the magic weapon of the half-immortal soldiers in his hand to destroy those strong stone pillars. Each stone pillar is as thick and thin as a house and looks very strong. However, in the hands of these monks who are half-stepping into the divine realm, especially those who still hold the magic weapon of semi-immortal soldiers of high grade, these stone pillars are not enough to see. Boom, boom. There were bursts of noise. In the thick dark fog between them, large stones collapsed everywhere. Every time, the roaring sound was a strong stone, which collapsed, and then was caught by the martial spirit puppet and thrown into the space entrance with rolling dark air. If you keep doing this, I'm afraid that in less than half an hour, 20 martial spirit puppets will remove all the strong stone pillars around the entrance of the underworld. However, Mingxiu finally took action. Countless Mingxiu fish waving thick chains came in one after another. Black chains rolled up to the Wuhuan puppet like a swimming dragon, trying to lock the Wuhuan puppet with chains. Seeing such a situation, Yi Tian's eyebrows moved. Is this the way Mingxiu came up with to deal with the martial spirit puppet? The greatest feature of the Wuhuan puppet is not its strong attack power, but its strong defense power. An ordinary attack can't hurt the Wuhuan puppet at all. Even if he falls from high altitude, he can fight as long as he doesn't lose his fairy jade. However, once it is locked by many chains, the Wusao puppet will lose its ability to move. As long as Mingxiu removes the fairy jade from the Wusao puppet, it will lose its ability to move immediately. This method is theoretically feasible. However, we should also look at the actual attack power of Mingxiu. Yi Tian wanted to see the actual combat situation, so when so many Mingxiu entered the stone forest to attack the 20 Wulin puppets, he was not in a hurry to detonate countless flesh and bones underground. In the stone forest, it had a very adverse impact on Mingxiu's manipulation of the chain. Some chains failed to entangle Mingxiu, but hit the stone pillar and bounced back. However, some Mingxiu are obviously stronger and have a strong ability to control the chain. When they entangle with the martial soul puppet, they seem to be alive and can avoid the sword chopping of the semi-immortal soldiers of the martial soul puppet. Some chains were also punched by those martial soul puppets, and even some martial soul puppets came close by taking advantage of the gap of the iron chain flying and killed Mingxiu, who was waving the iron chain to attack. But such times are rare after all. Usually, attacks such as Wuhuan puppets will be pushed back by the chains rolled up on the way, and then fall into entanglement. You don't have to look more. Yi Tian can see that this is definitely an effective means to deal with martial soul puppets. However, the reason why Mingxiu hasn't achieved obvious results is that the terrain here restricts Mingxiu, and the manipulation chain of Mingxiu is not flexible enough, and the cooperation between them is not coordinated enough. This is a human factor, not a tactical one. What if you change an open field, change the skillful chain manipulation, and cooperate with the close meditation? Then the attack power of Wuhuan puppets will be seriously restricted. In this way, netherworld cultivation can avoid close combat with the Wulin puppet, so the influence of the worldly clothes on netherworld cultivation will be greatly reduced. Moreover, Mingxiu is intended to trap the Wulin puppet rather than kill the Wulin puppet, so the powerful defense of the Wulin puppet loses its place. The biggest advantage of this method of the Ming nationality is that the Ming cultivation is too many miles, and the number of martial soul puppets is too small. Even if both sides just fall into a tangled war and their own martial spirit puppets are entangled, then they have failed. After all, without the annihilation of the martial spirit puppets, the pressure on the disciples of the Maitreya Palace will increase sharply. There will be no problem in self-protection, but it can't stop countless Ming practices from pouring into all parts of China. Thinking of this section, Yi Tian couldn't help sweating. Thanks to his use of this tactic today, Mingxiu exposed this secret weapon in advance. Although it is simple, it is very effective. If the other party suddenly uses this means at the time of the Great Showdown, it will definitely take the Maitreya Palace by surprise. Did the underworld set the date of the Great Showdown after half a month because there was not enough chain refining? Or is it because the number of chains used by Mingxiu is not very large, and it takes some time to practice? In either case, Yi Tian no longer thinks that the total attack time is due to the cultivation of invisibility by friars in Fengsuan spirit domain. Because in previous wars, it has been proved that invisibility cannot play a decisive role and can be easily broken by the Maitreya Palace. When thinking about this, Yi Tian saw that a martial spirit puppet was entangled by 4 lock links. Under the traction of the 4 Mingxiu, he couldn't attack again. Yi Tian frowned, motioned, took out the mask, then remained invisible and flew to the stone forest. Boom, boom. There was no surprise that the sound of explosion rang out everywhere Yi Tian passed, and countless ghosts were flying in all directions. Yi Tian's figure is very fast. The explosion caused by the second explosion is very short. It sounds like an instant explosion. In the stone forest, stones are flying, broken bones are shooting everywhere, the dark fog is rolling, and the sound is sky high. Who detonated the talisman? Who? In the sound of explosion, an ethereal sound came from the dark fog. This sound was the same as the sound in the previous dark fog. The source of the sound could not be found, but the sound was different. It was obviously made by two dark practitioners. With rage and anger in his voice, he was hysterical. Who detonated it? Damn. It seems that there is an extremely powerful Ming Xiu in the fog sea here, but why doesn't that Ming Xiu do it himself? Hearing this sound, Tian immediately realized the problem. Since he didn't come out, there was only one reason. Maybe he was afraid of death. However, he was also funny to himself. His invisibility detonated the attachment of the flesh and bones, but made the Mingxiu think it was done by the Ming family. It's good. At least the secret has not been exposed so far. After an explosion, Yi Tianxi was not hurt at all, but the stone forest was in a mess. All the strong and towering stone forests collapsed and were everywhere. The soil on the ground poured out and scattered countless flesh and blood fragments, mixed with the remains of Mingxiu and countless white bone fragments. Moreover, the chains used by netherworld practice flew everywhere, and some flew out of the stone forest ruins and fell outside the stone forest. The ground was uneven, and deep pits were even blown out in some places. At the periphery of the stone forest ruins, some Mingxiu who survived because they were not close to the stone forest have retreated wildly and avoided to the distance. They don't want any standing Mingxiu at present. The only one standing was only 20 half-step-by-step Wuhuan puppets. They were not fatally injured in the explosion, but the traces of the explosion on their bodies were extremely clear. They had bumps and were contaminated with a lot of soil and flesh. They looked very embarrassed, but their actions were as usual and were not affected at all. Yi Tian, who was invisible, ignored the martial spirit puppets, but carefully sneaked to the entrance of the underworld where the dark air still came out. Here, also affected by the explosion, all the nearby stone pillars collapsed and even uprooted. There are some stone pillars flying from a distance, lying near the entrance of the underworld. As soon as Yi Tian glanced, he summoned the ghost puppet and threw those stone pillars directly into the entrance of the underworld. Seeing that more than half of the dozens of stone pillars had been cleared, Yi Tian suddenly raised his eyebrows and looked around. He saw that countless Mingxiu around looked at the stone forest ruins again, and each Mingxiu waved a thick chain in his hand. It seems that Mingxiu has prepared for a long time. Maybe they have been prepared since the martial spirit puppets participated in the battle. So many chains can't be prepared in a period of time. Moreover, this is only what he saw in front of him, or only what appeared in this fog sea. What about other fog seas? Yi Tian naturally won't fight with these netherworld practitioners now. Seeing so many netherworld practitioners coming, he motioned and took out the Huafan stone refined by Tiangong sect. A magic force hit it. The Huafan stone quickly enlarged and covered the entrance to the underworld, and his body followed quickly with the Huafan stone. Finally, Huafan stones covered most of the entrance to the underworld, because the remains of stone pillars were not cleaned up next to the other half of the entrance. However, such a huge Huafan stone has an extremely wide range of influence. Many Mingxiu who have entered the influence range of Huafan stone can no longer hold the heavy chain in their hands and fall to the ground one after another. 6 or 7 martial spirit puppets moved one after another and killed those who entered the influence area of Huafan stone. Without mana, they can only leave the area affected by Huafan stone in the form of running. But how can the speed of running be compared with the speed of half-step God Realm martial soul puppet lightning? Those martial spirit puppets were all empty shadows, and there were countless debris on the ground. In the chaos, Yi Tian gestured and put some black chains nearby into Shumi Ring. Around, some Mingxiu who had just poured in saw that their compatriots were suppressed by Huafan stones and slaughtered, and then retreated like a tide. Around the stone, the vacuum state is restored again in a very short time. Are you Yi Tian? The ethereal voice in the sky appeared again. Yes, I'm Yi Tian. Who are you? Yi Tian replied with a random voice. You are not. Yi Tian was a little silent, and the voice sounded again. Whatever you want, I don't have time to talk to you. Yi Tian said, mobilized Huafan stones again and blocked the entrance of the underworld, because in a moment, the only remaining stone pillar debris had been completely emptied by the Wuhuan puppet. At the next moment, Yi Tian left 5 martial spirit puppets to guard on the Huafan stone, collected the rest of the martial spirit puppets, then motioned, put 10 top-grade fairy jade on the Huafan stone, and then walked away. If the martial spirit puppets are about to run out of stones, under Yi Tian's ideological command, these martial soul puppets have the ability to exchange fairy jade with each other, and Yi Tian doesn't need to do it himself. In the last Fog Sea, he also adopted the same method for the 2 martial spirit puppets left by Yi Tian. Once again, he fled into the ground. After going hundreds of feet deep, Yi Tian took out the 5 element beads and flying saucers again, recognized the direction and flew forward quickly. There are 4 fog seas. Yi Tian estimated that those fog seas may have received the news and may be ready. After leaving the fog sea range, Yi Tian flew stealthily into the air again, released his mind and covered the other 4 fog seas. He directly drove the fierce sword and let go of the 3 nearest fog seas, but directly to the farthest fog sea. According to normal thinking, the order of blocking the entrance to the underworld should be from near to far, one by one. The Terran Friar thought like this, and maybe the Ming cultivation thought like this. Because of this, Yi Tian wanted to go the opposite way and give the Ming cultivation in the fog sea a sudden attack. Xian Dragon Sword Spirit controls the fierce flying sword very fast. It has reached the distance in a flash in the air. It takes less than 15 minutes to go to the furthest fog sea. Outside the fog sea, Yi Tian sent out a divine thought to explore, but no meditation was found on the edge of the dark fog, but it was impossible to explore the depths of the fog sea. Simply, Yi Tian repeated his old technique and fled underground. He used 5 element beads and flying saucers to fly to the center of the fog sea. After several foggy seas, Yi Tian has found the law of looking for the entrance to the underworld. The dark fog spews out from the entrance of the underworld. The spewing out dark fog spreads in all directions with the entrance of the underworld as the center, forming a large and round fog sea. The center of the fog sea is the entrance to the underworld. In this area, the more intense the dark fog is, the closer it is to the entrance of the underworld until you finally see the billowing dark fog. The flying direction chosen by Yi Tian is exactly the center of the fog sea. Although the mind can't go deep into the fog sea, it can completely cover the whole fog sea under the mind. Therefore, it's really easy to find the center of the fog sea. But this situation is only explored outside the dark fog. At this time, Yi Tian can only rely on his previous experience when he goes deep into the dark fog underground. First, he flies away quickly underground. When he is about to reach the center of the fog sea, he slows down and observes through the source sky eye. Naturally, this speed is slower. It's not as fast as walking in the dark fog, but Yi Tian was much more cautious after he mistakenly entered the Nining enchanting field last time. I'd rather slow down underground than delay my time because of possible accidents. Because he was worried that the underworld was probably transporting reinforcements to the fog sea on a large scale through an unblocked entrance. Yuan Tian's eyes shone through, and Yi Tian looked for it a little. Finally, after some searching, he finally found that the symbolic thick dark gas column was rising into the sky, and the surrounding dark gas was surging and spreading in all directions. The entrance to the underworld, like the entrance to the underworld in the last fog sea, is like a replica there. Around the entrance of the underworld, there are many strong stone pillars and another stone forest. Many flesh and bones are still buried in the land under the stone forest. Different from the last fog sea, the Ming Xiu here did not patrol, but dug up the soil above the stone forest one after another, and put the flesh and bones into the storage bone vessels. These Mingxiu not only move very fast, but also always do this thing. Almost the whole stone forest has Mingxiu busy. In some places, the ground has been dug, and in some places, it is being dug. There are some tall white skeletons nearby. Seeing this scene in front of him, Yi Tian immediately understood that the fog sea here must have received the news from the last fog sea, and he didn't know how to know that breaking in could detonate these flesh and bones. They think it's far from the last fog sea. They should come and transfer these flesh runes before the intruder arrives. After all, even if this double-edged sword can no longer hurt Mingxiu, it can destroy the whole stone forest and pave the way for the entrance to the underworld. It's late. I'll give you a big meal. After observing the situation above, Tian put away the flying saucer, urged the 5 element beads, and flew stealthily upward. Boom, boom. At one moment, when Tian was in the detonating range, the flesh and bones within a few feet nearby exploded one after another, and the huge explosion roared in the fog. Before the roar fell, the explosion roared like a firecracker. Quit! An ethereal voice appeared in the sky, directing Mingxiu to evacuate. However, it's too late to withdraw now. Tian's body shape is far faster than those Mingxiu. In a moment, the whole stone forest has exploded. There are flying stone pillars, soil, and countless bones everywhere. Even some thick stone pillars were blown away, flew out of the stone forest and knocked down many nether repairs. You are Tian, you are Tian. Don't hide anymore, you are Tian. Just after the roar fell, the voice appeared again in the sky, which is different from the voice Tian heard twice before. Fool, are you guys shrinking turtles? I'm Tian. Did you hide it? Tian sneered at the unseen monk while releasing the martial spirit puppets to let them know the obstacles left at the entrance of the underworld after the explosion. Whether you are Tian or not, your Mithraea palace is dead. I tell you, it's too late to close the entrance to the underworld. Your Mithraea palace has caused unbearable losses to our underworld, but you have to pay a painful price, the ethereal voice continued. Ha! So it is. So many dead netherworld practices are also unbearable losses in your netherworld? Our lord, you thought that the netherworld practices in your netherworld are endless and can't be killed. It turns out that you are afraid of death. It turns out that you can't bear it? Tian said, ha. Of course, his voice is not his original voice, but it is completely consistent with the voice speaking in the last Fog Sea. He always pays great attention to these small details. You will regret, no. You will have no time to regret. You will never know the power of the underworld. Damn you. The voice was clearly angry. Tianling snorted, if you can only boast and talk big, I don't care about you. After that, Tian quickly approached the entrance of the underworld. When he quarreled with that Mingxiu, he naturally used a secret method, so that the other party could not find his position at all. Otherwise, how could he answer so easily? This time, Tian released more than 100 martial spirit puppets at a time. In a moment, the entrance to the underworld had been cleaned up. Then, Tian released a Huathan stone again and suppressed the entrance of the underworld here. When the Huathan stone fell, a bang directly blocked the billowing dark air, and the surrounding airwaves surged. Just at this time, a 4-star heartworm suddenly flew into the dark fog and disappeared for a moment. In order to ensure that he can know the blocking situation of each underworld eye at any time, he will release a heart-connecting worm for each underworld eye closed. If there is any problem, he can know it at any time. After leaving 5 Wuhuan puppets and 10 top-grade fairy jade, Tian directly ran away. You are Tian, you are Tian. When he just entered the ground, he heard the voice again in the dark fog. Do you think I can't see you? You are Tian. When diving deep underground, Tian could vaguely hear the sound getting smaller and farther away. There are 3 fog seas left. Tian returns and embarks on his way home. The other 3 fog seas are all near his way home. Now that Mingxiu has known that the Mithraea Palace wants to block all the entrances to the underworld, what will they do? Tian was not careless because the previous 2 entrances to the underworld were closed very smoothly. On the contrary, he became more cautious because he was almost in the light. Because now the Pluto has known that the intruder will appear at the entrance of the underworld again. What if you are a Mingxiu? What arrangements will be made? It must be the safest way to keep the intruder, rather than increasing casualties in vain. However, he has learned the means of Mingxiu. What bothers him most is the Juin ecstasy field. In order to be trapped by such a field again, Tian specially checked the small mirror in Zumaji. There should be no problem. When he came to this fog sea, Tian thought again and again and finally came to this conclusion. Then it was simple. He continued to go deep underground, drove the UFO from underground, and quickly flew to the dark fog center with 5 elements of beads. Everything went well. He arrived near the center of the dark fog. Before long, he found the entrance of the underworld with billowing dark gas. There is still a stone forest of almost the same size here, just like the entrance to the underworld of the previous 2 fog seas. Many flesh and bones are still buried in the soil under the stone forest. However, to Tian's surprise, there was no trace of treatment for the flesh bones buried here, as if they were always buried here. In the stone forest, it was also quiet. Except for the rolling black fog, I didn't even see a shadow of Ming Xiu. Tian is sure that the nether cultivation here must have received the news that intruders have closed the entrance of the underworld. Even the place farther than the fog sea has received the news and made some action. Why is it so quiet here? This situation makes Tian feel a little strange. Instead of getting close to the flesh and bones, he continued to drive the UFO forward, observed the situation more, and then decided how to act. It was always right. After observing quietly for a moment, Tian didn't feel any other abnormalities. Instead of rashly coming to the ground, he turned around the entrance of the underworld underground. Generally, the mind observation is used to observe the situation on the ground through the source sky eye. Unfortunately, although the observation was careful enough, no other abnormalities were found. When all the observations were finished, he thought a little, put away the UFO and the 5 element beads, and dived quietly to the ground. Although he felt that this situation was somewhat abnormal, his absolute confidence in his own defense did not cause him too much fear of the meditation here. In short, he should be careful. When he came to the ground, Tian didn't take action rashly. He observed carefully behind a thick stone pillar. There were no other changes in the fog sea because he came out of the ground. He began to approach the entrance of the underworld slowly. Zong will find out what the other party's plot is. However, when he was close to the entrance where the dark chi gushed out, nothing happened. At this time, Tian Kai cleaned up and silently held the ghost face mask in his hand. Boom, boom. At the moment of the appearance of the ghost face mask, the explosion of the nearby flesh and bones roared. Tian was heavily protected by treasure clothes. Naturally, he didn't care about this degree of explosion. In the sound of explosion, his body quickly swam around the entrance of the underworld and detonated many flesh and bones buried underground nearby. Under his deliberate control, the detonating range of flesh and bones was very small this time. The main purpose was to clean up the thick stone pillars near the entrance of the underworld. He ignored the flesh and bones farther away. He only needs to clean up the area near the entrance of the underworld. The flesh and bones that can be used later are also big killing weapons that he can control. Wouldn't it be a pity if he didn't blow up some underworld practices? As the explosion stopped, it did not seem that these terrible explosions had caused too many reactions from the nether practitioners, except for the dark fog which was more powerful than before. Very strange? Does Mingxiu just think so? The idea just flashed by, and Tian denied such speculation. After all, Mingxiu is going to launch a general attack on the Maitreya Palace in half a month. It's impossible not to rely on it. If he breaks in alone, the other party doesn't even resist at all. Isn't the general attack after half a month fart? Tian, who has always been cautious, observed carefully for a moment again. After confirming that he did not find any danger, he released 110 martial spirit puppets to clean the battlefield. However, when the martial spirit puppets flew to the entrance of the underworld, suddenly, Tian heard a strange sound, like a ghost crying, like a whistle, which came into his ears like a sharp drop into his mind. Mind attack. Tian was so experienced that he immediately realized that this was the sole attack of the high realm of meditation. As the name suggests, this attack is a special attack with the mind of the other party, and the target of the attack is the mind of the other party. Compared with mana attack, soul mind attack is more special. Mana attacks the other party's body, but no matter how strong the body is, it is ineffective against God mind attack. Those who can stop the attack of God's mind can only rely on the strength of their own God's mind. Compared with the monks in the same state, Tian's mind is absolutely a powerful existence, and even more powerful than the ordinary monks in the previous state. But now, under the attack of this sudden mind, he still felt his head prick, and he was dizzy for a moment. However, this was a very short moment. When he realized that he had been attacked by divine thoughts, he immediately turned the power of divine thoughts and understood the impact of this attack on himself. Moreover, Tian realized that the strength of the other party's mind had reached an unimaginable level. Moreover, it doesn't mean that if you have a strong mind, you can attack others' mind at will. It's impossible to do it easily. If you want to realize the mind attack, you need to master the skills of mind attack, that is, mind attack, so that you can skillfully use your own mind to attack the minds of others. Mind attack can only attack the other party with a stronger mind than the other party. Otherwise, it will not have any effect, and it may cause backfire because the mind is too weak. Another point is that when you attack with your mind, you need to lock the opponent in order to carry out an effective attack. Among monks, mind attack is not common. The main reason is that mind attack requires a long time of cultivation and flexible use, while people's time is limited. Almost no one will hesitate to choose the former between cultivating mana and mind attack. Because the former will bring about the improvement of the realm, while the latter's use of divine mind will not help the cultivation. When confronted with such a mental attack, Tian immediately realized that his deeds had been exposed, otherwise he would not be accurately locked by the other party. Perhaps it was at the moment when the mask was taken out that some force fluctuations were inevitable, thus exposing their position. Even so, it is enough to show that the meditation that attacks oneself is definitely not an ordinary meditation. However, to Tian's surprise, the other party's mind attack was only issued once, and did not appear again after he perfectly resisted the past. Tian feels a little strange. It is reasonable to say that the divine mind attack does consume the divine mind, but the Mingxiu who can attack with this degree of divine mind should at least be the existence of the level of the Ming Emperor, and the strong divine mind of the Ming Emperor can never only attack. However, this is the case. After the Wuhuan puppet cleaned up the stone pillar obstacles, and even Tian took out the Huafan stone to suppress the eye of the underworld, that kind of divine attack never appeared again. Not only did the divine attack not appear, but even the meditation did not appear. Even the ethereal sound in the fog sea did not appear. Seeing that the entrance of the underworld has been perfectly closed by Huafan stones, Tian left 10 martial spirit puppets and left here with doubts. Next, Tian continues to go to the remaining 3 fog seas to block the entrance of the underworld. The 3 fog seas are equally calm. It is clear that there are countless nether practices in the fog sea, but there is no nether practice guard at the entrance of the underworld, and even those flesh bones have not been disposed of. Dense stone forests are arranged near the entrance of the underworld. Tian uses the same method to blow up the stone forests near the entrance and block them with Huafan stones. The entrance of the underworld of the 3 fog seas was blocked very smoothly, and there was not even a divine attack in the 4th fog sea. This smooth makes Tian's doubts reborn. Is it that the underworld has completed all the preparations for the general attack in half a month, and the forces that should be mobilized have entered the fog sea? Or is there another conspiracy of Mingxiu? With many doubts, Tian drives the UFO and embarks on the way back to the Western Front Theater. No. On the way, Tian on the UFO suddenly thought of a key link and couldn't help crying out. Mingxiu must have a big plot. Thinking of this, Tian's eyebrows trembled a few times. It must be. There was only one soul attack, which must have been a sudden attack on himself by the powerful meditation. Seeing that he couldn't kill himself at once, he immediately resolutely gave up the spirit attack. Among them, there must be the idea of such an attack. However, these are not the main, and the most important thing is that although the Wuhuan puppet is driven by the best fairy jade, the main part still relies on the soul to complete all instructions. This kind of martial soul puppet is basically immune to mana attack. Their biggest weakness is soul body, especially soul mind attack. Tian left a heartthrob near the Huafan stone that closed the entrance of the underworld to supervise and monitor the situation there. So far, HIA has not found that any Wuhuan puppet has been attacked by God. However, what if Mingxiu doesn't move now, but suddenly launches a divine attack on the martial soul puppet during the general attack? Tian realized that the matter was very serious. After returning to the Western Front Theater, Tian quietly entered the magic weapon cave of Tiangong Branch. After staying inside for half an hour, he quietly left, released his magic weapon Dongkung Fu in a remote place in the war zone and went in. Sitting on the futon, he calmed down a little and took out the Dan stove and ice lotus. At this time, Tian spent several petals to refine a lot of pills to enhance his mind. Although it was cultivated in the magic weapon cave in the field for 5 times, the time is still too short, and the ice lotus has not fully recovered. However, Tian took off a petal and sent it to the entrance. The petal entrance melted, and then a cold wave spread all over the body and penetrated into the brain, and the mind grew slowly. This is not the first time he swallowed the ice lotus petal. With each swallowing, his mind increased to varying degrees, but at the same time, he also found that the first swallowing of ice lotus had the strongest effect on the increase of mind. With the increase of swallowing, the effect decreased every time, perhaps because his mind was too strong. On the contrary, the increase of divine thoughts is not so obvious. However, after swallowing the ice lotus petals this time, when the cold disappeared, he could still feel that his mind was much stronger. Now that he knows that Mingxiu has the means of divine attack, he has to make some preparations to deal with the possible sudden divine attack at any time. In the war, not only themselves, but also other disciples of Yupu territory may also become the target of divine attack, and these people are the top power of the Maitreya Palace, which cannot be lost. Therefore, Tian did not hesitate to pick 3 petals again, supplemented by other precious spiritual materials, and began to refine the pill. I don't know how long it took. When the heaven and earth stove was put away, Tian called all the great friars in Yupu territory to the cave, and there was also the golden eye divine carving. Ladies and gentlemen, please tell me about my trip to the Fog Sea to close the entrance of the underworld. There are 7 fog seas on Earthstar. 2 of them have been closed one after another. The other 5 have been closed smoothly this time, completely cutting off the same path of the Ming Qi flowing into Earthstar and preventing the Ming people in the underworld from continuing to flow into Earthstar. Tian looked around the people present and said, "Now, the rest is simple. Whether it's a decisive battle, or breaking one by one, or killing one by one, we have no worries at the Maitreya Palace." Yen Yunyang said with a very relaxed look. Tian shook his head when he heard the speech, and said solemnly, "Although the entrance of the underworld has been closed, from the current point of view, the underworld can't continue to increase troops to the Earthstar for the time being. It doesn't mean that the underworld cultivation that has entered the Earthstar is so easy to deal with. Don't say that we have to protect the Chinese people, that is, we simply practice the underworld cultivation, regardless of others, and we can't take it lightly." Did the palace master find anything when he entered the Fog Sea this time? Morong Jun asked with a frown. Tian nodded slightly. "Yes, I did encounter 2 things, and they were all aimed at the Maitreya Palace. The first..." At this point, Tian motioned, took out the chains from Shu Mi Ring, and continued, "This is the way for Mingxiu to deal with Wuhuan puppets in the Fog Sea. These 3 or 4 feet long locks are suitable for far attack. Multiple Mingxiu cooperate to attack a Wuhuan puppet, which can avoid being subject to Huafan clothes." Yen Zhongkai motioned, grabbed a chain in his hand, twisted it with his fingers, and then frowned slightly and said, "This chain is extremely strong. It is strong enough to bind the martial spirit puppets. But there are tens of thousands of martial spirit puppets in our Maitreya Palace. How many chains does Mingxiu have? It's not clear at present. There are only tens of thousands of chains revealed by the practice of Ming, but it only appeared in one of the Fog Seas. It's unknown whether there are others in the other Fog Seas. But now that this sign is found, we must be careful. I have arranged the Tiangong division to suspend the refining of Dingshan beads, step up the refining of Tianlei, and focus on strengthening the practice of Ming. It's a means to repair the chained soldiers. Moreover, with the war, the Maitreya Palace should try to kill this part of Mingxiu." Tian said solemnly. "Moreover, before the war, the western camp here should advance 500 miles to the west and launch a decisive battle with Mingxiu in the forest of the western regions. Although Mingxiu can fly and the height of the forest is insufficient, it is good for the Maitreya Palace to be in the forest after all. Everything is arranged by the palace master." Morong Jun nodded slightly. Tian continued, "As for the second case, who found a meditation practitioner who used the mind attack in the Fog Sea? This meditation practitioner's mind is strong, and ordinary monks can't resist the mind attack of that intensity. In particular, the martial spirit puppets are likely to be subject to the mind attack of the meditation practitioner. All of you here may also be the target of the mind attack. With the strength of your mind, you should not as for the worry of life, but on the rapidly changing battlefield. If the Ming cultivation is supplemented by the divine attack and the fierce attack, even a stun time may bring extreme danger, which must be prevented. When they heard the speech, they all nodded slightly and felt that Tian was very reasonable and could be regarded as preparing for a rainy day. There is no good way for this method in a short time. It can only be targeted at the source. Any meditation that can attack such thoughts should be eradicated at the first time, so as not to change the war. Your thoughts are already very strong. In order to make this easier, the leader of the palace has refined some pills to enhance your thoughts. Take 3 pills for each person and 1 every 3 days. After taking it, your mental power should be increased to about 60% within 9 days. As Tian spoke, he took out 9 jade bottles, and then the 9 jade bottles slowly flew to the 8 big friars in Yupu territory in the golden eye divine carving. Thank you, palace leader. All the people, including Xian Run, took the jade bottle and thanked Tian with joy. When the cultivation reaches their level, not to mention that the divine mind can increase by 60%, even 10%, it is a great improvement. These pills are even more powerful than those given by Tian last time. It can be seen that in order to refine these pills, Dan Di must have spent a lot of precious spiritual materials. Tian waved his hand again and said, as for the 2 situations mentioned by the palace leader just now, you should also think carefully to see if there is any better way. The defense should also be strengthened recently, so as not to catch us unprepared. After all, the 7 entrances to the underworld have been closed. If the previous half-month period was to wait for reinforcements from the underworld, then well, it's not necessary to wait now. Well, I'll do the westward movement of the camp now. I have some things here. Tiangong branch and Taisho branch will stay here for the time being. Yes. After hearing Tian finish, the people said nothing more and left the magic weapon cave one after another. The cave was quiet. Tian sat quietly in the cave for more than half an hour, as if he were meditating, and as if something was difficult to make a decision. His eyebrows were tight and silent. Half an hour later, he slowly took back his mind from the Dantian and meditated again. For half an hour, he was always observing the Ningyao spirit species in Dantian. After a period of cultivation, the spirit species had been very powerful. According to Tian's estimation, it should meet the conditions for reshaping the flesh body. At present, the war is imminent, which is not the best time to reshape Ningyao's flesh. If he did not find that there is a powerful Mingxiu who is good at divine attack, he would not be eager to reshape Ningyao's flesh these days. However, if Ningyao's spiritual seed is kept in his own Dantian all the time, once the attack target of Mingxiu is changed to Ningyao's spiritual seed, the consequences will be unimaginable with Ningyao's current spiritual intensity. After all, Ningyao is just a soul. Tian had never done such a thing before, and even Taisui didn't give him more good advice. Now he can only rely on his own ideas, touch the stone to cross the river and try to reshape Ningyao's flesh. The reason why he refused to appoint was that he was not sure about it, and it was imperative. As the Emperor of Dan, Tian is naturally familiar with the theory of Danli, pharmacology and practice. Reshaping the flesh body is similar to seizing and giving up rebirth in some places, but it is not exactly the same. After all, this reshaping of the flesh body is to use Sancheng lotus as the carrier, not someone else's body. In this way, the flesh of Ningyao's heart needs to create perfect dantian and meridians, the power of blood, and the perfect integration of soul and flesh. Everything is not easy to do. After pondering for a moment, Tian gestured and took out the hard-won Sancheng 3 lotus root from Shumi ring. Then, he gestured continuously, and the jade altar containing the fortune liquid and the jade altar containing the Tiger King medicinal wine appeared in front of him one after another. At present, there is still half of the original creation liquid, but the Tiger King medicinal wine is only 30% of the original. Tian directly took half of the Tiger King medicinal wine and put it in a crystal green jade altar. Then he carefully put the Sancheng 3 lotus root in it. The medicinal wine just didn't exceed 3 lotus roots. Then Yi Tian slowly observed the changes of lotus root. Tiger King medicinal wine has the function of cutting bones and washing marrow, which is for the monk's flesh. However, since it has such an effect, Yi Tian thinks it should also have a magical effect on such spiritual lotus roots through his daily research. Sure enough, as Yi Tian expected, with the 3-cut Sanqing 3 lotus roots soaked in the medicinal wine, the color of the medicinal wine gradually deepened and the liquor began to become turbid. On the contrary, Sanjia Sanqing 3 lotus root has become more and more shopping, and the lotus root body has become more white and crystal clear from the light yellow of the original lotus root, as if it had been really removed by cutting bone and washing marrow. Yi Tian carefully observed the changes of lotus roots in the jade altar. At one moment, he gestured, and 3 white lotus roots flew out of the jade altar and suspended in front of him. At this time, the 3 lotus roots have undergone earth-shaking changes. They are not only bright and clean, but also scattered with a faint light, as if they were rare treasures. Rain. At the next moment, Yi Tian drank lightly, and the water attribute Taoism issued. Suddenly, a drizzle fell in the cave and poured it on the glittering lotus root. After being washed by the rain, the lotus root looked more and more white. When the water stains on the lotus root completely disappeared, Yi Tian took out a clean jade plate and put 3 pieces of lotus root on the jade plate. A drop of the liquid of creation and chemistry immediately dripped on the 3 lotus roots. As the liquid of creation and chemistry penetrated into the lotus roots of Sanqing and Sansheng, the light emitted by the lotus roots became brighter. At a certain moment, Yi Tian was surprised to find that under the action of more and more fortune liquid, the 3 lotus roots began to slowly connect together, and even the 2 broken parts in the middle fused together. Finally, they perfectly integrated into one, as if they had never been broken. I can't see that this lotus root is made up of 3 parts. At this stage, Yi Tian knew that he was in the right direction. At least for the time being, the lotus root of Sanqing 3 has become better. Wrong. Next, Yi Tian took out the shaped flying ginseng obtained in the square-inch spirit realm, summoned the original spirit fire, and refined it with fire directly above the lotus root of Sanqing 3. Drops of Tian ginseng drop on the glittering lotus root and blend into it. Almost at the same time, Yi Tianyuan's eyes shone through the lotus root and used magic to control the ginseng liquid to pass through the lotus root, just like a soft array penetrating the lotus root, creating a complex vein. Then there is Dantian, and Yi Tian adopts the same method. These are just big bodies. When Tian ginseng is completely refined, under the action of ginseng liquid, the lotus root has completely changed its shape from inside to outside, just like a real human body, with everything in its head, limbs and trunk. After these last night, Yi Tian gestured again, took out a magic weapon cave medicine garden, directly enlarged it, and flashed into the cave. When he came out again, there was already a flesh-white luminous body in his hand, which was the spiritual root from the Tsangming world. After a long time of cultivation, the whole body of this spiritual root is full of aura. Even if you smell it, it makes people feel refreshed. Looking at the spirit root in his hand, Yi Tian gestured, and his fierce flying sword appeared in his hand. He gently everything on this object and divided the spirit root in half. Strangely, it seems that the spiritual root of a living creature does not exude any blood under everything, but changes from 1 peristaltic luminous software into 2 peristaltic luminous software. After a little meditation, Yi Tian took out the 5 elements of beads, and the surrounding was shrouded in a hazy yellow light. Then he sent half of the cut spiritual roots directly into the lotus root. The original spiritual roots, which were much larger than the lotus root, melted quickly when they entered the lotus root and were absorbed by the lotus root. At this time, Yi Tian's gesture did not stop, and a drop of natural liquid fell into the lotus root. With the integration of the liquid of good fortune and the spiritual root in the lotus root has undergone strange changes, began to expand continuously, the light converged, and the whole lotus root body has become soft. A little bit towards the human body. At this time, Yi Tian's whole body was perfused, and his fingers kept stroking the lotus root body. Every moment, the lotus root body was constantly changing. From the initial human shape to the facial features, it became more and more clear. Later, it could be recognized at a glance. It was exactly what Ning Yao looked like. It is almost as like as 2 peas. After more than an hour, the lotus root finally stopped growing, and a beautiful body as bright as jade has been completely formed. It has to be said that this kind of lotus root is too magical. Although this body also has Yi Tian's subjective will, the lotus root seems to understand Yi Tian's mind. Everything he thinks in his heart can be accomplished. Even hair, teeth and eyes are vivid. Looking at the body in front of him, Yi Tian seemed to have an illusion for a moment, as if Ning Yao was lying in front of him. A moment later, Yi Tian took out a dress, put it on the lotus root body, and gently sorted it out. At this time, the key step of reviving Ning Yao is the integration of soul and body. Although the body is perfect, it will still fail if it cannot melt more perfectly. After a little silence, Yi Tian gestured. Ning Yao's huge spirit seed slowly left the dantian and suspended in front of Yi Tian. He didn't let Ning Yao's spirit seed be exposed outside for too long. He directly sent the round white light mass to the head of the lotus root body through the action of 5 elements of beads. At the moment when the white light mass entered the head of the lotus root, Yi Tian was surprised to find that the light mass was changing autonomously, and the original round light mass began to turn into a human shape. It looks like the pocket version of Ning Yao. Then, the pocket version of Ning Yao continues to grow until it is fully integrated with the lotus root flesh refined by Yi Tian. At the moment of the complete fusion of the two, the white light in Ning Yaoling's body suddenly converged and disappeared, and no longer existed. The lotus root was suddenly covered with the smell of Ning Yao, even between the chest and abdomen. The long eyelashes began to shake slightly, but the eyes never opened. Yi Tian is so familiar with the smell of fireworks and dust in the world. The richness of this smell is far more than the spirit itself. In this case, Yi Tian was very happy. He observed the body slightly, and then made a gesture. A large number of fairy jade appeared in the magic weapon cave to surround Ning Yao. Yuan Tian's eyes shone through, and Yi Tian observed that the aura in Xianyu was rapidly pouring into Ning Yao's body and integrating into this body. The color of these fairy jade is also changing rapidly, from the original crystal white to dim a little, until it turns into gray without any aura after more than 10 minutes. With the influx of aura, Ning Yao's body began to have blood color, and her breathing and heartbeat became very obvious. Yi Tian gestured to clear away the lost fairy jade debris, took out a large number of fairy jade again, and surrounded Ning Yao. The fairy jade that was taken out again was still quickly absorbed by Ning Yao's flesh. Until the aura inside was absorbed, Yi Tian changed to batch again. As if the body was a bottomless pit, Yi Tian kept changing Xianyu, batch after batch. It didn't stop until Ning Yao's body had become the same as before under the nourishment of Reiki. Suddenly, when the body absorbed the spiritual power crazily, a burst of ecstatic expression suddenly appeared on Yi Tian's face. He even felt a slight fluctuation of mana on Ning Yao's body. What does mana fluctuation mean? It means that Ning Yao is no longer a soul, nor an ordinary person, but a cultivator. Unexpectedly, the lotus root of the third generation is so magical. While reviving Ning Yao, it can also be accompanied by the realm of strengthening cultivation? Yi Tian murmured and continued to observe Ning Yao carefully. Dongfu territory is very important. Cave territory double. 3 levels of cave territory. As the aura in the vast amount of fairy jade was absorbed by Ning Yao, the rapidly transformed mana began to rush into the realm again and again in Ning Yao's dantian, and soon reached the triple level of the cave realm. While Yi Tian was eagerly looking forward to the continuous improvement of Ning Yao's cultivation, suddenly Ning Yao's body gave a faint hum, and then slowly opened her eyes. Yi Tian. Yaoer dreamed of you again. If only she could see you. Seeing Yi Tian in front of her, Ning Yao murmured with a trace of joy, a trace of sadness and a touch of soft light. Perhaps, as a spiritual species, she can often dream of Yi Tian, and the scene in front of her is also regarded as a dream that is no different from the past. However, for Yi Tian, her sentence is like the sound of nature. Yaoer, it's not a dream, it's true, you've been resurrected. He took Ning Yao's hand and said excitedly. His hands were very soft, as before, with the temperature he had long been used to. Isn't it a dream? Ning Yao said leisurely, with a beautiful smile on her lips. 4 levels of Dongfu territory. Although Ning Yao woke up, her mana was still slowly accumulating, and another small barrier was broken through. Yi Tian helped Ning Yao gently sit up and said in a very gentle voice, Yaoer, touch my face and see if it's a dream? Hee, I touched your face countless times in my dream, but it's a dream. Ning Yao said something. She gently got up and squatted in front of Yi Tian. Her voice was a little bitter, but in the end, you still have to disappear, and then everything goes back to the dark. Yaoer, I didn't expect that you could integrate so well and move freely. Such a situation made Yi Tian ecstatic. He didn't expect that Ning Yao could stand up by herself and squat in front of him. Once in Qingming Blessed Land, Ning Yao often squatted down to talk to himself, but his voice was full of joy and loveliness at that time. Yi Tian, I don't know how long I can dream of you. I hope it won't disappear so soon. Ning Yao stroked Yi Tian's face and muttered, with a lot of reluctance in her eyes. Yaoer, I will never disappear again. What I want to tell you is that this time is really not a dream. You have really resurrected and reappeared in the world. You feel that you already have mana. Look here, I am using Xianyu to restore mana to you. Yi Tian touched Ning Yao's long hair and said affectionately. Isn't it a dream? Ning Yao looked around and saw the mountains of fairy jade around her. She gently picked up a piece. The aura of the fairy jade was instantly absorbed by her and turned into a gray color. It's really not a dream, I sensed the operation of mana. Ning Yao was stunned for a moment, and then looked at Yi Tian. Her eyes were full of surprises. Then she picked up a piece of fairy jade again. As before, the spirit of fairy jade was absorbed by her in an instant, leaving only the remains of fairy jade in her hands. Yi Tian. It's really not a dream, it's really not a dream. Ning Yao's tone was more and more surprised. She moved slightly and wanted to try to fly, but she didn't achieve her wish, but more firmly believed what Yi Tian said. In any previous dream, she was able to fly freely, floating like an immortal, but not this time. Yes, Yaoer, you are finally resurrected. Yi Tian looked at Ning Yao's expression and said with a sour nose. I really live. I just think death is eternal. From the moment I fall, I can only meet you in my dream. Ning Yao kept looking at her body and smiled happily. Unexpectedly, there will be such a day when she can stand in front of you again, hold your hand and touch your face. Yes. At this moment, we have been waiting for a long time. We will never separate again, Yaoer. Yi Tian's eyes turned red and took Ning Yao in his arms. Ning Yao felt the familiar embrace and smell, showing a happy smile. Yi Tian, I vaguely remember that my last memory was that I left Qin Luo's body, and that I was in chaos. Now I feel that you have practiced in Yuanying territory. Should it be 40 or 50 years? It's really hard for you to find a way to revive Yaoer after so many years. I know how difficult it is to reshape the flesh like me. This love. Yaoer will keep it in mind. As if talking nonsense, Ning Yao whispered between Yi Tian's arms. Yi Tian pulled over Ning Yao's beautiful face and stared. Yaoer, no matter how difficult it is, I am willing to revive you, even if I spend my whole life. Moreover, it doesn't take much time. It's only 2 years from your last memory. 2 years? Yi Tian, you mean? It took you only 2 years to practice in Yuanying territory? Ning Yao asked in surprise. Yi Tian nodded heavily. Yes, it took only 2 years. Yaoer, you are also fast. Now your cultivation is soaring. Don't be distracted and try to improve your cultivation. As he spoke, his robe sleeve was thrown away, and a lot of fairy jade absorbed by Ning Yao was swept aside. Then a lot of fairy jade appeared next to Ning Yao. Yi Tian, where is this place? Why do you have so many fairy jade? Ning Yao asked in surprise as she looked at the piles of fairy jade debris and the newly appeared fairy jade. This is the earth, where we came after the fall. These fairy jade are nothing. I have a lot of fairy jade, which is inexhaustible. You can rest assured to restore your cultivation. Yi Tian briefly introduced. Ning Yao nodded, looked at Yi Tian affectionately, then motioned and silently operated the Qingning Ju skill. With the operation of her skill, the whole body absorbed fairy jade several times faster. Why did Yi Tian do this? How did his accomplishments improve so quickly? Ning Yao asked in surprise again, feeling that a steady stream of Reiki had been transformed into mana and stored in the Dantian. Yi Tian also showed the color of meditation and said, Yaoer, your body is remodeled with a natural material and earth treasure called Sanchang Lotus. Several other treasures are also used, including a magical treasure called Lingzhen. It has a very strong ability to absorb the aura in Xianyu. According to my speculation, it should be the result of the joint action of Lingzhen and Sanchang Lotus root. It's really bothering you. Ningyao looked at Yi Tian gratefully, then stopped talking and began to concentrate on running. Qingming decided to improve his cultivation. She knew very well in her heart that Yi Tian must have experienced many dangers in order to reshape his body. Now is a good time to recover his cultivation. Wasting this time is to live up to Yi Tian's painstaking efforts. Yi Tian also didn't say anything more. He motioned, and there were all kinds of porcelain vases in front of him. He chose one of them, took out a crystal white pill from it and sent it to Ningyao's lips. Ningyao immediately understood, gently opened her cherry-like mouth and swallowed the pill into her stomach. At the entrance of the pill, it turns into a pure energy and quickly flows into the dantian of Ningyao. The 7 treasures of the cave. 8 treasures in the cave. 9 treasures in the cave. Ningyao's momentum is getting stronger and stronger. She broke through the sea viewing environment at Zhouzhong in the cave environment, and her momentum is still rising rapidly. The aura in the fairy jade around her body is still absorbed by her at an extremely terrible speed. Yi Tian quickly picked up a jade bottle, pulled out the cork, took out a pill from it and sent it to Ningyao's mouth again. The previous pill was used to help the monks in the cave realm cultivate, but this pill was used to help the monks in the sea viewing realm cultivate. These pills were made by Yi Tian himself, and the remaining pills were taken by Qin Luotian and Er. It's just now used on Ningyao. As Yi Tian's pill was delivered to Ningyao's mouth, the pill turned into huge energy, making the mana fluctuation of Ningyao stronger and stronger. In the early stage of Dongfu territory. In the middle of Dongfu territory. Later period of Dongfu territory. Yi Tian quickly replaced a large number of fairy jade. The fairy jade debris absorbed by Ningyao has occupied more than half of the cave. If Yi Tian hadn't collected it into Zumaji, I'm afraid the cave of Nuada would soon be filled with the fairy jade debris. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he would never believe that a person's speed of absorbing the aura in the fairy jade would reach such a terrible level. Time passed in a hurry as Ningyao frantically absorbed Reiki. Soon, she has broken through from the sea view to Longmen. In the early stage of Longmen territory, in the middle of Longmen territory, later in Longmen, after breaking through the peak of Longmen territory, I broke through the Golden Elixir territory again. Until she broke through the Golden Elixir realm, Ningyao's cultivation speed slowed down, and the absorption speed of Xianyu was not as terrible as before. But her breath was still rising slowly. Early stage of Jindan territory, middle stage of Jindan territory, in the later stage of Jindan realm. When Ningyao broke through to the later stage of Jindan realm, the rise of cultivation stopped completely. The golden elixir is late. Ningyao felt her breath and looked at Yi Tian muttering. She couldn't believe the speed. Yaoer. I spent a lot of time in the later stage of my cultivation in the golden elixir realm. I'm afraid you will be able to gather Yuanying and catch up with my cultivation speed soon. Yi Tian took Ningyao's sword in his arms and walked to a single room in the cave. Yi Tian, you. Ningyao asked in silence. Yaoer, I miss you. Yi Tian quickly walked into the room, gestured, and the door was opened. Half an hour later, in the room. Ningyao's face was still flushed and nestled in Yi Tian's arms. Yi Tian, I really didn't expect that we still have the day of rebirth and reunion. How did you come over the past 2 years? Yi Tian stroked Ningyao's eyebrows and said tenderly, since you took the initiative to leave Qin Luo's body and become a spiritual seed and keep it in my elixir field, I secretly vowed to revive you no matter how hard you went through. Later, due to various opportunities, I passed through various spiritual domains and finally found 3 lotus roots by chance. I got spiritual roots in a spiritual domain, plus the creation we buried in the blessed land of the green world. Huaguaya really succeeded in reviving Yaoer in this way. Maybe this is the will of heaven. Yi Tian, I don't know how the disciples of the Qingming blessed land are now. Ningyao looked a little bleak when Yi Tian mentioned the Qingming blessed land. Yaoer, you should be prepared. Once our Qingming blessed land has become an ocean, and the Qingming blessed land no longer exists. However, there is no good news. Yi Tian said with a heavy heart. When he saw that Ning Yao looked a little gloomy, he suddenly said, the blessed land of Qingming is not completely destroyed. 263 disciples have been saved. Moreover, on earth, I have rebuilt the Maitreya palace, which is larger than the blessed land of Qingming. There is better news. I have plotted against our 8 sections. Among them, Qing'anzi, the ancestor of the blessed land of Lingshu, has been killed by me, and the blessed land of Lingshu has been destroyed. Zhao Tianhu has also been captured alive and abandoned. I have achieved accomplishments, and now I am imprisoned in the spirit beast ring. Qing'anzi and Zhao Tianhu were great friars in Yupu territory. Now, after many years, how did Yi Tian do it? Ning Yao asked in surprise. Ning Yao's spiritual seed is always cultivated in Yi Tian's dantian and is in a state of deep sleep, so we can't know all this. Yi Tian explained, it's a long story. For Ning Yao, Yi Tian didn't hide a trace. He told her everything about entering the mirage, seeing Hua Su and getting a grimace mask one by one. Then he mentioned that Qing'anzi had broken through to the heavenly palace, which made Ning Yao sigh. In this way, after destroying the Holy Land, I took the people of the Temple and the Water Moon sect to the Earth Star. These 2 sects have now joined the Maitreya Palace. Those enemies in the Fengsuan spirit domain want to enter the underworld through the dark friars in the dark abyss of the Fengsuan spirit domain before I am strong enough. They come to the Earth Star and collude with the underworld friars. The picture shows a joint effort to deal with Weifu and the Maitreya Palace. After briefly introducing the severe situation facing the Earth, Yi Tian said to Ning Yao. After hearing Yi Tian finish, Ning Yao's face became dignified. She asked anxiously, the underworld and the friars of the 8 Zongmen deal with the Maitreya Palace together. Can we compete now? Yi Tian smiled and said, Yaoer, don't worry. It can be said that the current Maitreya Palace is much stronger than that in those days. There are 8 big friars in Yupu territory alone, and there were only 2 big friars in Yupu territory in those days. As for the friars in Huashan territory and Yuanying territory, they are also far better than that in those years. Moreover, the cards and other aspects are far from that in those years. Yes. Moreover, so far, 9 of the 15 Yupu monks of the 8 sects have died at the hands of the Maitreya Palace, and only 6 of them remain. As for the Pluto, our Maitreya Palace has made full preparations, and there is still a great chance of victory. Ning Yao nodded slightly and said in a deep voice, Yi Tian, I have a request. I want to participate in the battle of the 8 sects in Fengsu and Lingyu. I want to fight side by side with you. Yaoer, your body has just been remodeled, and you still need some time to nourish. It's not suitable to do it for the time being. Yi Tian quickly and politely refused. He was the only one who knew how much trouble it took to reshape Ning Yao's body. Ning Yao's cultivation didn't help the war, but it was dangerous. Naturally, he didn't want Ning Yao to take risks himself. However, Ning Yao said stubbornly, Husband, you always fought alone before, and Yaoer couldn't accompany you. Now that Yaoer has been resurrected, you will never take risks alone. In those years, it was the 8 sects that led to the destruction of Qingming blessed land. Why didn't Yaoer report this hatred personally? Otherwise, even if you killed those people yourself, Yaoer will regret it all his life. I hope your husband can do it. Yi Tian looked at Ning Yao, and Ning Yao also looked at Yi Tian. When he saw Ning Yao's pleading and stubborn eyes, Yi Tian gently sighed, in this case, you will participate in the battle, but in order to ensure your safety, all subsequent hearts will follow my arrangement. Well, as long as we can face the enemy directly, issue his hatred in the past, everything will listen to her husband. Seeing that Yi Tian agreed to his request, Ning Yao finally smiled. Take this. At this time, Yi Tian gestured, and there was a green jade bottle in his hand. Ning Yao took the jade bottle suspiciously, poured out 3 crystal white pills from her face, and looked at Yi Tian. Do you take these 3 together? The smell of the pill made her look cool. You don't have to ask, you know this pill must be very precious. Yi Tian said, Yaoer, take 1 pill first. After the power of the pill has been refined, take another pill, and so on. Ning Yao picked up a pill and put it in her mouth. The pill was cold to the bone. She shivered in an instant. What a familiar feeling. I was so cold in my sleep. Ningyao hugged her arms, murmured, and then said softly, my mind. Your mind is soaring. Yi Tian held Ningyao's hand and said, when cultivating your spiritual species, I used a spiritual material called ice lotus to make your soul body extremely strong. In this way, I can smoothly integrate the third generation lotus and regenerate through the body. It's really a pity where you found such a magical material. Now I can feel that the strength of divine mind is no less than that in the later stage of transforming the divine realm. It should have been strengthened at the time of Yunyan? Ningyao said with a slightly reminiscent look. When Yi Tian heard that Ningyao said that her mind had reached the level of the later stage of transforming the divine realm, he was relieved at once, and then said with a smile, that's good. When all the three pills are refined, there should be a significant increase in mind. Only in this way can I rest assured that you can personally participate in revenge. As he spoke, Yi Tian gestured, and there were 300 martial soul puppets in the magic weapon cave. Is this the magic weapon of human form? Suddenly seeing these martial spirit puppets, Ningyao was stunned and thought they were living monks. However, this martial spirit puppet without command was completely like a dead object and had no flexibility of monks. She couldn't help asking tentatively. Yes, Yaoer, these magic weapons are called Wuhuan puppets. They are driven by the best fairy jade. Each of them has the attack power of half stepping into the divine realm. You should quickly mark the soul and recognize the Lord. These Wuhuan puppets are your bodyguards. Yi Tian said with infinite favor. Who knows? Ningyao shook her head, held Yi Tian's hand and said softly, Yi Tian, the Maitreya Palace is about to start a war with the monks in the spirit domain and the Ming monk. It's time for the palace to employ people. You'd better use these martial spirit puppets on the battlefield. You just need to give Yaoer a magic weapon. With my strong mind, you should be able to protect yourself. Hearing the speech, Yi Tian scraped Ningyao's small nose and said with a smile, you're still like this. You always think of others. To tell you the truth, there are many martial spirit puppets in our Maitreya Palace. Up to now, there should be at least 40 or 50,000. These 300 martial spirit puppets are only for you. The number is not much. Besides, you want to participate in the war and can also be used in the battlefield. You don't have to refuse. 40 or 50,000? Yi Tian, do you mean that there are 40 or 50,000 martial spirit puppets who have reached the half-step divine realm? Ningyao looked up in amazement and asked. She was really surprised by the news. Yes, you heard correctly, and this is a conservative estimate. Now this kind of martial spirit puppet is stepping up refining, and the number will be more in a period of time. Yi Tian nodded determinedly. In this way, isn't the strength of the Maitreya Palace more than 10 times that of the Qingming Blessed Land? Ningyao was stunned, compared it in her heart and asked. Not only. With the current strength of the Maitreya Palace, it can be worth hundreds of Qingming Blessed Places, otherwise it can't compete with the whole underworld, including the 8 patriarchal gates of the square-inch spirit domain at the same time. Yi Tian said with a smile. Yi Tian, you're making me happy, aren't you? If you say 10 times, I still believe it, but if you say hundreds of times, ghosts believe it? Although this kind of martial spirit puppet has reached the half-step divine realm, and there are tens of thousands, at that time, there were 2 great friars in Yupu realm, hundreds of times of strength. Wouldn't there be hundreds of great friars in Yupu realm to support it? Although the Maitreya Palace is powerful, there are only 8 great friars in Yupu territory, Ningyao said with a smile. That's Yaoer. I don't know how many cards there are in the Maitreya Palace. I'll explain them to you one by one later. Now let's recognize these martial soul puppets first. Let's say one is neat. Yi Tian smiled and said patiently. Well. Ningyao nodded gently, no longer insisted, but quickly stamped the brand of God on these martial soul puppets. Her mental strength has exceeded Yi Tian's prediction range, and the speed of recognizing the Lord is very fast. With a large number of martial soul puppets branded by Ningyao, Yi Tian's heart is gradually reassured. At least in case of danger, with the protection of these martial soul puppets, she will have enough time to rescue, even if she falls in love with the great friar of Yupu territory. More than an hour later, Ning Yao finally recognized the master of all 300 martial soul puppets, and tried to command them. With her powerful mind, she issued various conscious instructions, such as arm instructions. Okay, Yaoer, you will not fight alone at any time now. This sword. You also recognize the Lord. Then, a dark golden sword appeared in Yi Tian's hand, which was his fierce flying sword. Just when Ning Yao recognized the master of the Wu soul puppet, Yi Tian negotiated with the Ziyun dragon sword soul. The sword was used by Ning Yao and guarded by Ziyun dragon. The 300-year contract agreed by the two people was also changed to a 100-year contract. For Yi Tian's request, Zion Long sword soul naturally wants it. She knows very well that Yi Tian takes great care of this Ning Yao and will treat himself more favorably, rather than wait a little longer because the sword changes its owner. So it's a matter of saying. Ning Yao took over the fierce soldier's flying sword and said in surprise, "This sword is by no means an ordinary thing. Is it your real name magic weapon?" Yi Tian smiled and nodded. "It used to be, but now it's Yaoer's. I don't need this magic weapon. Yaoer, there is a sword spirit in this sword. It's the soul of Ziyun dragon sword. It was originally an 8-level monster. Although it didn't fully recover its strength, this sword took the initiative to kill all monks in the realm of God. I can rest assured that this sword is around you." "Then you?" Ning Yao knew Yi Tian's temper. Since he decided, it was difficult to change, but she still asked with some worry. Yi Tian smiled and said, "Rest assured, Yaoer, I have a more powerful magic weapon, which is so powerful that you can't imagine." What he said naturally refers to the Tian Luo net and Ho Yi's Bao. Of course, Shanha's seal is also included. These three magic weapons are definitely much stronger than the fierce soldier flying sword. Therefore, although Yi Tian uses the fierce soldier flying sword very smoothly, he has nothing to give up for Ning Yao. Listening to Yi Tian's words, Ning Yao nodded and took the fierce soldier's flying sword. Since Ziyan Longjianling himself had agreed and accepted Ning Yao as the new master, the process of recognizing the master went very smoothly. Ning Yao then experimented and said strange again and again, and then collected the sword into his body. "Yaoer, this flying magic weapon is for you." Yi Tian opened his mouth again, and his gesture moved. The mini flying saucer had appeared on the palm of his hand. Flying magic weapon? Yi Tian. Yaoer now has the cultivation skills in the later stage of Jindan territory. If he can fly by himself, he doesn't have to use this flying magic weapon, right? Seeing this, Ning Yao smiled in a low voice. Yi Tian used to do the same. He often gave her some strange gadgets, but just gave her a smile. "Who knows this time?" Yi Tian said very seriously. "Yaoer, don't underestimate this flying magic weapon. Its speed has reached the level of friars in Washenjing. It is particularly convenient to use this flying magic weapon for long-distance flight. It can reach the speed of transforming the divine realm. Sure enough, who is a wonderful treasure?" Ning Yao exclaimed, took it over and quickly completed the process of recognizing the Lord according to Yi Tian's instructions. "Yaoer, you need to be proficient here." "I'll come when I go." Seeing Ning Yao's love for this thing, Yi Tian warmed his heart with a smile. Then without waiting for Ning Yao to say anything, he went straight out of the magic weapon cave. More than 10 minutes later, Yi Tian returned to the cave again, and a slim beauty came back with him. "Who is this?" Ning Yao asked, looking at Yi Tian suspiciously. "Eagle girl, come on, this is your new master, my Taoist companion Ning Yao." Yi Tian pointed to Ning Yao and said with a smile. "Carving lady? I see. Is this the same person of the shape-changing demon clan?" Ning Yaoruo got up with some understanding and looked carefully at the beauty transformed by the golden eye divine carving. The carving lady has seen her master. In more than 10 minutes, Yi Tian has reached an agreement with the carving girl and exchanged the pill for the carving to recognize Ning Yao as the main one. Yi Tian added a heavy safety insurance to Ning Yao. "What a beautiful carving girl!" Ning Yao exclaimed as she held the hand of the divine carving. "Well, Ning Yao, she will be your spiritual pet in the future. If you have time to contact, finish recognizing the Lord first," urged Yi Tian. Ning Yao nodded slightly and felt extra warm in her heart. No doubt, the treasures given to her by Yi Tian must be highly valued by him. The god sculptures that can turn into shapes are at least 6-level monsters, which were rare in the former Qingming blessed land. She knew that the war was imminent and the time was urgent, and Yi Tian didn't know how much time she had delayed in order to reshape his flesh. Therefore, at this time, she completed the process of recognizing the Lord directly with the cooperation of the carving girl. Sister Diao, we will be partners in the future. After recognizing the Lord, Ning Yao took the Diao girl's hand and said kindly. Then she looked at Yi Tian, smiled and said, "Give me the best and most comfortable spirit animal ring." "I can't be wronged, Sister Diao." Yi Tian affectionately rubbed Ning Yao's hair and said, "The divine eagle rarely lives in the spirit beast ring now. She has her own magic weapon cave, and below is the magic weapon cave for you." With these words, Yi Tian took out 2 magic weapons from Zumaji, put them in front of Ning Yao, and said, "This is the magic weapon cave with 5 times the time field. That is to say, 1 day of cultivation in it is equivalent to 5 days outside. One can be used by yourself and the other can be used for standby. Moreover, this spirit beast ring is also given to you. It should be more convenient for God carving in the spirit beast ring in case of emergency, so as not to take out the cave first and then call her out." As soon as the voice fell, 2 small and exquisite magic weapons Dongfu appeared in front of Ning Yao. "Yi Tian, you really surprised me this time. How did you get so many precious treasures? It's a good thing. 1 day is 5 days. Doesn't that mean that if the disciples of the Maitreya Palace practice in such a magic treasure cave, they will have a chance to enter the Jade Pu realm?" Ning Yao stroked the 2 magic treasure caves in front of him and said with information. Yi Tian smiled and said, "It's natural. The Maitreya Palace has a field branch and a Tiangong branch. The Tiangong branch can refine the magic weapon cave, while the field branch can arrange 5 times the time field. If time is enough, this magic weapon cave can be refined in large quantities. And here you are." With the voice, Yi Tian's gesture moved again, and a pile of armor clothes appeared on the ground. "This is dragon armor. This is Xianin stone treasure coat. This is Huafan stone treasure coat." Yi Tian pointed out one by one to Ning Yao and asked her to recognize the Lord one by one. After hearing Yi Tian's detailed introduction to the use of these clothes, Ning Yao was completely shocked this time, especially the dragon armor. Yi Tian put on 15 pieces for him at a time. If this armor could not be hidden in his body, I'm afraid Ning Yao had been wrapped into Rounzongzi. "Yi Tian, with these treasures, the strength of the Maitreya Palace is beyond my imagination. As you said, the strength of the Maitreya Palace has exceeded hundreds of times that of the former Qingming blessed land. It's really not exaggeration," Ning Yao said with emotion. Yi Tian said with a smile, "Yaoer, the strength of the Maitreya Palace is far more than these. There is also a royal beast division in the Maitreya Palace. There are nearly 400,000 animals under control alone, of which the number of 5 or 6 order monsters is not a small number." 400,000? How can there be so many? This time, Ning Yao was completely stunned. "Yi Tian, how did you do it? When time is enough, you should tell me all these things before and after, so that I can know how you came over the past 2 years. Well, after the war, we'll lie in bed for 10 days and nights. I'll tell you everything I've experienced." Yi Tian nodded happily and agreed. Ning Yao peeked at the carving girl, then gave Yi Tian a white eye, and a blush appeared on her face. "Yaoer, before the war, I'll take you to the Maitreya Palace." Yi Tian understood why Ning Yao blushed. In order to alleviate the embarrassment, he stood up and said to Ning Yao, "Well, I really want to see what the Maitreya Palace looks like on Earth." Ning Yao also stood up excitedly and walked out of the magic weapon cave with Yi Tian. "Yaoer, you can experience the speed of divine carving now," Yi Tian said as he put away his magic weapon in the cave. Hearing what Yi Tian said, the carving girl immediately changed her body and recovered her body. Yi Tian took Ning Yao's small hand and jumped onto the carving back. The golden-eye god eagle flapped its wings and soared into the sky. Here, in front is the Maitreya Palace. Before Ning Yao could adapt to the high-speed flight of the golden-eye god carving, Yi Tian nearby had already spoken. "It's as like as 2 peas in the blessed place." Ning Yao was calm in mind watching the lofty palace on the summit. Yi Tian, I really feel like I'm in Qingming blessed land now. It seems as if everything that happened before has never happened. It's good to be a couple of fairies with such quiet years, no killing, no conspiracy and intrigue. Ning Yao murmured. Yi Tian clenched Ning Yao's small hand and said softly, yes, what was missing in the past will supply you. In the past, you guarded me in the square-inch spirit domain. Now I'll guard Yao Er. At this time, the golden eye statue has slowed down, circled above the Maitreya Palace, and then fell on the square at the foot of the Maitreya Palace mountain. Ning Yao snuggled up to Yi Tian and stared at the Maitreya Palace on the mountain. Her eyes were wet. Although this is only a piece of architecture, Ning Yao feels Yi Tian's feelings for Qingming blessed land and himself from this piece of architecture. Every plant and tree is the past, and every brick and tile is affectionate. Yao, today is an unforgettable day in my life, and it is also the most joyful day for me in recent years. The reason why I want to bring you here is not only to see the Maitreya Palace, but also to let you meet the former disciples. Yi Tian took Ning Yao's shoulder, looked at her, and said with a smile. Come on, where are they? Let me see. Ning Yao looked even more surprised. I'll see you soon. Yi Tian said with a gesture. He took out a magic weapon cave. After closing the door of the magic weapon cave, he passed his voice in, all disciples, meet each other out of the cave. With Yi Tian's voice, figures flashed out of the magic weapon cave and came to the square. The disciples were about to salute Yi Tian when they suddenly saw Ning Yao standing beside Yi Tian with a smile and tears in his eyes. Shuren Yang. Is that you? Shuren Yang. Shuren Yang. Someone gave a tentative shout. When he saw Ning Yao nodding heavily, many disciples came around with a crash. Some female disciples even rushed to Ning Yao's side and burst into tears. The atmosphere became warm, moved with joy, and the cries were mixed with cheers. Both Ning Yao and his disciples have mixed feelings. This view is a real separated life. Almost all these people are reincarnated. Ning Yao looked at the disciples one by one. She could still shout each other's names and talk about some interesting things in those years. Looking at these disciples, they were full of energy and their magic power was almost the same as that in Qingming blessed land, and her heart was filled with emotion. It was not until 263 disciples met one by one that Ning Yao looked at Yi Tian. Yi Tian, these disciples will follow me, pay with blood, and take revenge on those enemies. We should participate in it ourselves. We want revenge. Revenge for the dead fellow. Master, we want those enemies to pay with blood. With Ning Yao's voice, the disciples shouted excitedly. Okay, Yao, the Qingming branch will be set up temporarily in the Maitreya Palace. You will temporarily govern all the disciples and avenge the dead fellow disciples. Yi Tian slowly raised his hands, suppressed the voices of the people, and solemnly said, next, distribute resource allocation for the disciples of Qingming branch. Next, Yi Tian took out a large number of resources to equip his disciples, including dragon armor, all stone treasure clothes, Xianin stone treasure clothes. In addition, there are Qingyun shuttle, Huafan slate, Banxian soldier flying sword, Xianyu, Dan medicine, and all the resources of other disciples of the Maitreya Palace are distributed to these former disciples. Just for a moment, the disciples who had fought back without iron had been armed to their teeth. Although the number is small, these disciples are in high spirits in front of Yi Tian and Ning Yao. They want to have a showdown with those enemies in Fengsuan spirit domain immediately. Well, all disciples go back to the magic treasure cave to take pills for cultivation. When you need revenge, you will be released naturally. Now what you need to do is to improve your cultivation as soon as possible in the magic treasure cave, when all the resources are distributed, Yi Tian said loudly. Naturally, all the disciples have no objection. Their cultivation now has not made much progress compared with that when Qingming blessed land was destroyed, but the enemy is always practicing. Up to now, although they knew that the Maitreya Palace was very strong at this time, their desire for personal revenge became stronger and stronger. Therefore, with Yi Tian's greeting, they happily entered the magic weapon cave with 5 times the time field. Yao, although you have reached the later stage of the golden elixir realm in a short time, there should be a lot of room for improvement in a short time. Just in time, I also saw the Qin Luo god you once possessed. For the time being, you can practice together. There is a very magical thing that can help you in your cultivation, when everyone enters the magic weapon cave, Tian said, gazing at Ningyao affectionately. Ningyao nodded slightly and said, although I really want to stay with you all the time, I know the war is coming. You still have a lot of things to arrange, and my cultivation is still very low. Listen to my husband's arrangement. Tian heard Ningyao's reluctance. He rubbed her hair and said, I believe you will improve your accomplishments soon. Thank Qin Luo God. If it weren't for her existence, I'm afraid there would be no place for Yao's soul, and there would be no resurrection today. As he spoke, Yi Tian gestured and took out a magic weapon cave again. Brother Yi Tian. With the door closed, Ear rushed out first. Ah! Sister Luoshan. When she saw Ningyao, Ear was stunned and hurried back, but she saw Qin Luo God behind her and Sure Ran came out. Two sisters of Luoshan? Ear looked at this and that, widened her eyes and showed an incredible expression. This should be Fairy Ningyao? Qin Luo was also stunned for a moment. However, she quickly reacted and looked at Yi Tian. Sister Luoshan. At this time, Ningyao could still remember what she attached to Luoshan. She walked over with infinite emotion, took Qin Luoshan's hand and said gently, Yes, I'm Ningyao. It's Yi Tian who reshaped my body and resurrected me with the soul. Before, all kinds of things were in front of me. Seeing Sister Luoshan, I really felt connected by blood. I didn't expect that in just a few years, Sister Luoshan also practiced to the later stage of the Golden Elixir realm. The speaker is careless and the listener is intentional. Up to now, Yi Tiankai noticed the changes in the breath of Qin Luo God, and it really reached the level of the later stage of the Golden Elixir realm. He remembered clearly that Qin Luo God and Ear broke through the Golden Elixir realm not long ago, which was only the early stage. Have you crossed the middle stage of the Golden Elixir realm and broken through to the later stage of the Golden Elixir realm so soon? Who is this sister? Ningyao took Qin Luo's hand and said a few words, then held Ear's small hand. Ah, Fairy Ningyao, my name is Ear. You look like Sister Luoshan. I'm afraid next time I meet, I still can't tell whether it's Fairy Ningyao or Sister Luoshan. Ear's small hand is held by Ningyao. She is still looking at this and that, with a shocked expression on her face. This is the daughter of Yen Yunyang, the head of the temple branch. She has always been inseparable from the Lord Luo. During the period when I left the earth, the Maitreya Palace was in danger. It was the temple that sent a helping hand to help the Maitreya Palace through the disaster. Yi Tian introduced Ear's realm cultivation. He found that although Ear's mana has made a lot of progress, it has not reached the middle of the Golden Pill realm. Compared with Qin Luo God, the gap is not generally large. Luoshan, how did you break through? Yi Tian asked curiously. Qin Luoshan also said in confusion, in fact. I don't know what's going on. Some time ago, suddenly, the mana in his body suddenly soared, and he broke through to the middle of the Golden Elixir realm. Soon, he only broke through to the later stage of the Golden Elixir realm, and then returned to normal. Some time ago? Yi Tian also felt a little confused about this explanation, but then he thought of something and suddenly looked at Ningyao. Not long ago, Ningyao broke through to the later stage of Jindan in this way. Is there some connection between the breakthrough of Qin Luo God and Ningyao's recovery to the later stage of Jindan territory? After all, the two people happened to be in the same state, and both had broken through to the later stage of the Golden Elixir state. Yaor, Luoshan and Ear, you are now practicing martial arts at the same time. With such a guess, Yi Tian immediately said to the three. Ningyao was holding Ear's hand and talking. When she heard Yi Tian say this, she knew there must be a reason, so she nodded, looked at Qin Luo God and began to run the Qingming sword formula. Qin Luoshan and Ear stood in the same place and tried to run the Qigong method. A moment later, Yi Tian looked at Ningyao. Yaor, can you find anything unusual? Ningyao Ningmei thought for a moment and said, if you want to say something unusual. It seems that the speed of cultivation is twice as fast as that in memory. Yaor, keep working. God Luo, what about you? Yi Tian said to Ningyao and asked Qin Luo. Qin Luoshan felt it carefully and said, I don't feel it either, but I'll try it now. As she spoke, she didn't wait for Tian to say anything. She turned and ran back to the magic weapon cave. However, in 2 or 3 minutes, she came out of the magic weapon cave again, and said excitedly to Tian, "I just tried outside the cave, and I felt a little bit, but I'm still not sure. Now I go back to the magic weapon cave and try around Little Chestnut." As expected, the speed is faster than before, and the speed of magic transformation is about twice as fast. "What about you?" Tian nodded slightly and looked at Ear. Ear shook her head in doubt and said, "I don't feel much. It seems that it's no different from before." Hearing what Ear said, Tian was more sure of his guess, but he still had to verify it for the last time. "Lord Luo, stop using the skill and feel it again." Tian looked at Qin Lord Luo again. Qin Luoshan stopped the skill according to the words and stood quietly waiting. Up to now, she didn't understand what Tian wanted to do. "How do you feel now?" After waiting for more than 10 seconds, Tian continued to ask Qin Luoshan. Qin Luoshan also showed a confused color on his face and said uncertainly, "Tian, I don't know if there is an illusion. I've stopped running the skill, but how do I feel that there is still a steady stream of mana in my body?" "Okay." Tian had sensed this situation. Now Qin Luoshan himself confirmed this. He immediately shouted "good," and then said to Ning Yao, "Yaoer, you can stop running the skill." Ning Yao also stopped working immediately according to Tian. She guessed something in her heart and seemed to look forward to Qin Luo. "Lord Luo, what's the matter? Is there still a steady stream of mana produced?" Tian eagerly looked at Qin Lord Luo. In this case, Qin Luoshan also felt some of the reasons, and she also looked at Ning Yao in surprise. At this time, after Tian asked, she felt it carefully, immediately shook her head and said, "Tian, there is no magic power. Now there is no magic power. It is difficult to double the magic power and the previous cultivation speed. Is it related to Sister Ning Yao?" Tian did not answer Qin Luo's question, but said again, "Luo continues to operate the skill, and Yaoer stops the skill." Qin Luoshan and Ning Yao immediately understood and did what Tian said. "How is it?" Looking at Ning Yao's happy look, Tian has sensed the result, but he can't wait to ask. "There is mana." Ning Yao nodded hard, and the joy on her face was more obvious. "Well, it should be certain that there is a mana induction between you and Luo God, that is, when you cultivate, she is also benefiting, and when she cultivates, your mana is also increasing. If you cultivate at the same time, each other's cultivation speed will naturally increase exponentially. This miracle is the first time to hear. Does it have something to do with your same body at the beginning?" Tian said happily, and his face showed the color of meditation. "If you two are separated for a distance, take Baizhang as the boundary, and then try again. It's Luoshan's cultivation and Yaoer's induction." After thinking about it, Tian continued. "Okay." Ning Yao and Qin Luo both knew what this meant. They immediately agreed and retreated for a distance. When the distance between the two sides was about 100 feet, they stopped. "Tian, you can still feel the increase of mana." After a moment, Ning Yao said loudly. 10 miles away, try again." Tian continued. Hearing the speech, Ning Yao and Qin Luoshan drifted back, separated by about 10 miles. At this distance, they tried again. No matter who practiced, the other party could still feel the automatic growth of mana. "Maybe this is a blessing in disguise," called the two together again. Tian said excitedly. "This is a great good thing for Ning Yao and Qin Luo. You all go back to the magic weapon cave and continue to cultivate. Note that cultivating next to the little chestnuts will be more helpful to your cultivation. I'm going to prepare for a war with the Hades. Well, you should be careful. Don't forget that you can't leave our Qingning branch at that time." Ning Yao told him, and then took Qin Luo and Ear into the cave. In the Maitreya Palace, Tian didn't stop too much and returned to the western camp by Golden Eye Divine Carving. As time went by, Tian, who returned to the western camp, began to be nervous and busy. Taking advantage of the calm time before the war, he spent some time in the magic weapon cave. He finally walked out of the magic weapon cave and began the final layout. The whole western front began to get busy. Countless disciples of the Maitreya Palace came out of the magic weapon cave, took their places and were ready to fight at any time. Yower, this is 1,000 martial spirit puppets. Recognize the Lord as quickly as possible. In front of a certain camp, Tian gestured, and rows of martial spirit puppets appeared in front of Ning Yao, who had walked out of the magic weapon cave. Next to her, 263 disciples of Qingming branch flashed a light of hatred in their eyes and looked into the distance. Among the 1,000 martial spirit puppets, Ning Yao left 200, and the rest were assigned to the Washington disciples of the Qingming branch. After this period of intensive refining, the Tiangong division kept fighting in the magic weapon cave in the field for 5 times, and finally refined 32,000 martial soul puppets. These martial spirit puppets were assigned to each division by Yi Tian to enrich the strength of each division. Palace Master, something's wrong. Just as Yi Tian watched the disciples of Qingming branch recognize the master of the martial spirit puppets one by one, Yan Zhongkai suddenly appeared in front of Yi Tian. Yi Tian nodded and said to Yan Zhongkai, "Follow the original plan and don't let any Ning Xiu break through the defense line." Although he was here, Yi Tian's mind was always open and observed the situation of the Western Fog Sea. At this time, the Ming Xiu and the 6 Fog Seas had begun to come out of the dark fog, and there was a sign of joining forces. Yi Tian is not afraid of them joining the army. He is most worried that they are too scattered, because there are too many Ming Xiu. Once dispersed, he occupies an absolute advantage in quantity and is not so easy to resist. Yes. Palace Master. Yan Zhongkai promised, glanced at Ning Yao and asked, "Is this Taoist friend Ning Yao fairy?" Yi Tian nodded slightly and said, "Yes, it's my former Taoist companion, the former master of Qingming blessed land, Ning Yao." Disrespectful, disrespectful. Yan Zhongkai made a head check and said, "I heard that the Palace Master resurrected Ning Yao fairy. It's lucky to see you today." The temple branch congratulates the Palace Master on his reunion with Ning Yao fairy. Ning Yao smiled back and said, "It's gratifying to see many elites in the temple join the Maitreya Palace. The glorious rise of the Maitreya Palace is bound to be expected. Since I'm reshaping my body, I must work with you to shake the prestige of the Maitreya Palace." Yan Zhongkai nodded slightly, so Yan will go back to his camp. After this war, he will receive the wind for Ning Yao now. With that, Yan Zhongkai hugged his fist and disappeared from his place. After Yan Zhongkai left, Ning Yao looked at Yi Tian and said, "This Yan Taoist friend has reached the peak of Yupu territory, and is also a top figure in the Maitreya Palace. There are also 2 big friars in Yupu territory of Shueiyue sect. I don't know how you netted them to join them?" Yi Tian smiled. "There's a saying that goes well. Peaches and plums have their own way without words. If you come in full bloom, there's infinite possibility because you joined the Maitreya Palace. Who would miss such a good opportunity? Well, Yower, let the carving girl be with you. She can see those invisible friars in the square-inch spirit domain, which can help." Ning Yao nodded again. "Go and be busy. After these days of cultivation, I have reached the peak of the golden elixir realm. I can cope with the general situation. What's more, I still have fierce soldiers and flying swords. Well, I'll go now." Yi Tian said, moved, and flew to the west. It won't take long for the nearest fog sea to be in sight. At the edge of the fog sea, countless meditation practitioners are ready to move and gather together. It seems that they are waiting for other meditation practitioners in the fog sea to meet. Within the coverage of the divine mind, he can see that all the other 5 netherworld practices have come out of the netherworld fog and flew here quickly. There are countless netherworld practices. Yi Tian directly skips the first fog sea and faces the next fog sea. "You are Yi Tian." The hoarse voice from the sky is still so ethereal. Yi Tian didn't pay attention to the sound, but the source sky's eyes shone through and continued to fly forward. "Whether you are Yi Tian or not, today is the end of the Maitreya Palace," the voice said reluctantly. Yi Tian still ignored the voice. He accelerated his speed to meet the endless meditation thousands of miles away. It seems that Ningxiu and the Fog Sea saw the emergence of Yi Tian, and immediately dozens of gold bone puppets came out and killed quickly in the direction of Yi Tian. He flew at the same high speed, and was visible in the sight for a moment. Only dozens of golden bones were repaired, only one continued to fly to Yi Tian, and the rest stopped in place. Yi Tian sneered and understood the meaning of the other party. He didn't know whether he was the real Yi Tian and sent someone to test. It seems that his deception has played a certain role, so that the other party can't confirm whether he is poisoned. With this in mind, Yi Tian would not reveal his true identity for a gold bone puppet. His body suddenly stopped and waited quietly for the gold bone to repair. Jingu Mingxiu is the existence of Mingzuan level, which is equivalent to the strength of the Great Friar of the Terran Yupu realm. It seems that the strength is very strong, but in Yi Tian's opinion, he doesn't pay attention to each other. When Yi Tian took the golden bone ghost to the front, he suddenly made a gesture, and more than 200 martial spirit puppets appeared out of thin air and surrounded the golden bone puppet. The golden bone puppet looked like a flash and turned into a golden streamer. He avoided the siege of many martial soul puppets and went east from high above. Yi Tian ignored the golden bone puppet, but drove more than 200 martial soul puppets to move forward and fly towards the dozens of martial soul puppets in front. Who knows, in this way, the gold bone puppet who had flown past suddenly stopped in the air, turned around again and flew towards Yi Tian. Unexpectedly, he ignored the temptation of Jingu Mingxiu. He just sent more than a dozen martial spirit puppets to meet Jingu Mingxiu, who returned. Instead, he took the rest of the martial spirit puppets and continued to fly forward towards the dozens of golden bones. Boom! Suddenly, the dozens of Jingu Mingxiu gestures moved, and each Jingu Mingxiu flew out a chain like a swimming dragon, sweeping towards the front martial soul puppet. The chain has a length of more than 10 feet and is connected by many dense short rings. It looks soft, flexible, and highly flexible. Dozens of chains were faster than lightning and shot at those Wuhuan puppets. Seeing that the chains were about to wrap around the Wuhuan puppets, many Wuhuan puppets moved one after another. The half-immortal soldiers flying swords in their hands turned into streamers and cut into the fast-flying chains. Ka! Ka! Although the chains are very flexible, they can't stand many martial soul puppets. The Banxian soldier's flying sword is particularly powerful. After a loud and clear sound, the top parts of the dozens of chains were cut off and fell to the ground. But the dozens of golden bone Mingxiu did not stop, and continued to urge the remaining chains to attack the martial spirit puppet. Almost at the same time, more than 100 martial spirit puppets flew straight forward and rushed to the dozens of golden bones. It seems that those golden bone Mingxiu knew the power of the martial soul puppet, flashed one after another and shot back. This was a failed attack, which ended with Jingu Mingxiu retreating. However, Yi Tian in the rear really saw that the number of Wuhuan puppets was large and dense, so they could cover each other. Once the Wuhuan puppets were alone and besieged by a large number of Mingxiu, I'm afraid the situation will be reversed immediately. The number of Netherworld practitioners is too large. If you want to stop the attack of Netherworld practitioners, these martial soul puppets must disperse and block. If they gather too much, although they can attract some Netherworld practitioners to a great extent, the rest will certainly drive straight in. In particular, these golden bone nether cultivation and chain manipulation pose the greatest threat to the martial soul puppets, which must be eradicated first. Yi Tian glanced at the Jingu Mingxiu, who came back to participate in the encirclement and killing of the Wu soul puppet, and was scared to go back. He sent out an idea instruction and flew to the dozens of Jingu Mingxiu with the Wu soul puppets around him. At this time, countless Hades in the distance are approaching quickly. If Yi Tian continues to pursue and kill, he is bound to be surrounded by countless Hades. However, Yi Tian seemed to regard those dark practices as nothing. The direction did not change, the speed did not change, and continued to fly forward with many martial spirit puppets. Countless Mingxiu crossed dozens of gold bone puppets, spread out a large area, waved chains, and shot at Yi Tian's puppets. Come on! Yi Tian shouted loudly. In an instant, a half-immortal soldier flying sword appeared in his hand, cutting at the chains that came from flying together with many martial spirit puppets. Up to now, he didn't sacrifice his mountain and river seal, just to finish the must-kill blow to the dozens of golden bones. Although the surrounding Mingxiu is dense, more than 200 martial soul puppets gather together. The chain soldiers of Mingxiu have not achieved any effect. On the contrary, the other party is afraid to get too close to Yi Tian because they are afraid to change the stone treasure clothes. As a result, Yi Tian, together with many martial spirit puppets, has left in an invincible position. However, the scene once became extremely chaotic. In the chaos, Yi Tian's figure suddenly disappeared. When Mingxiu found that Yi Tian was missing, a golden shadow suddenly magnified on the top of the dozens of golden bone Mingxiu's head. In an instant, it had turned into the size of more than 100 mu, as if it were overwhelming. No, it's Yi Tian, it's really Yi Tian. There was a sudden burst of drink from Jingu Mingxiu, and he wanted to fly around in an attempt to escape the suppression of mountain and river seals. However, it was too late to escape at this time. With the rapid suppression speed of mountains and rivers, those golden bone Mingxiu just moved. They felt that the essence of the surrounding air was generally hardened, and their whole bodies seemed to be imprisoned in a moment and could not move anymore. It was not until this time that these golden bones Mingxiu really understood the terrible power of mountain and river seal. Although the power of this seal was widely spread in Mingxiu, they personally experienced the power of this magic weapon for the first time. Yi Tian suddenly released the mountain and river seal, covering dozens of golden bone Mingxiu. After a successful attack, he released more martial soul puppets without hesitation. A figure flew around and began to harvest the golden bone Mingxiu under the suppression of mountain and river seals. The martial spirit puppets continued to fly out, and in an instant, more than 2,000 martial spirit puppets joined the battle group. There is no doubt that none of the golden bone Mingxiu under the suppression of mountain and river seal can escape the poisonous hand of the Wolin puppet. Together with the other white bone Mingxiu who were suppressed by the pond and fish, they are also quickly cleaned up by the Wolin puppet. Under the mountain and river seal, only 300 or 500 martial soul puppets are needed, and the rest of the martial soul puppets have flashed like a torrent and directly killed many nether practices outside the suppression of the surrounding mountain and river seal. Where the puppet went, Mingxiu collapsed and retreated one after another. Under the command of Yi Tian, these martial spirit puppets completely ignored the single white bone Mingxiu and followed the defeated white bone Mingxiu into the army of Mingxiu. The martial spirit puppet and Mingxiu are mixed together, which makes the chain army of white bone Mingxiu unable to fight for the moment. The martial spirit puppet drives straight in, and the people of Mingxiu are invincible. At this time, Baigu Mingxiu under the suppression of mountain and river seal had been killed. Yi Tian gestured, and Shanhian rushed towards the army of Mingxiu again. Many martial spirit puppets, such as tarsal maggots, rushed all the way with Shanhian. In an instant, the bones of the great army of Mingxiu flew around and collapsed into an army. However, Yi Tian's more than 2,000 martial spirit puppets are limited after all. How can we completely block the tens of millions of Mingxiu army? Outside this battlefield, countless armies of netherworld practitioners kept flying away to the east and the first fog sea to meet with the netherworld practitioners there. Is that all? If you still have any tricks, just let them out. Yi Tian knew that Mingxiu was powerful and could not be stopped by himself. This time, he attacked alone. In addition to preparing to use the power of mountains and rivers to destroy the top power of Mingxiu, he also wanted to test what means Mingxiu had. However, at this time, I still didn't see the other party's big move. The friars in Fengsuan spirit domain didn't see it. The other party's bones with dark poison didn't show up. The only sign that Mingxiu showed was the chain that had been used in the fog sea before. The enemy situation is unknown. Yi Tian doesn't love war too much. He sends out an idea and command to summon more than 2,000 martial soul puppets. He returns with the mountain and river seal and pursues the rolling Mingxiu. Woo woo! When Yi Tian rushed all the way, several strange sounds appeared in the sky almost at the same time, straight to Yi Tian's eardrum. Mind attack! Yi Tian immediately realized that these were several high-level Mingxiu who sent out a divine attack to himself at the same time. Although this attack was very fierce, Yi Tian strengthened his divine power several times. Although he had only Yuanying territory cultivation, his divine power had surpassed those great monks in Yupu territory. Although this degree of mind attack has a certain impact on him, it will not cause him any harm. The sources of these sounds are mixed among many Mingxiu brigades. Yi Tian can only distinguish the general direction, but he can't lock which Mingxiu body sent it from. However, judging from the intensity of this divine attack, he has been able to judge that once a friar with too weak divine mind is attacked, his divine mind will be damaged at first, and his life will be worried at last. The three voices, he recognized, were the three nether practitioners who attacked God at the same time. He pondered a little and gave up attacking those white bone Mingxiu who went eastward. Instead, he put mountain and river seals and shot at Mingxiu in a certain direction. When the mountain and river seal flew away, suddenly in the army of Mingxiu, an insignificant white bone Mingxiu rose into the sky when the mountain and river seal flew, turned into a white light and disappeared in the sky. Yi Tian, I can't imagine that your mind is so strong. However, it doesn't matter. You're not afraid of mind attack. Not everyone in the Maitreya palace is as strong as you. Ha ha. The good play is still ahead. Let's see. In the sky, an ethereal voice came again. Yi Tian could distinguish it. This time, it was the voice that appeared when he closed the entrance to the underworld in the third fog sea. What a cunning Mingxiu, he actually uses a very ordinary skeleton attached to the bone, and deliberately suppresses the breath. If his mind is not strong enough, he will not find the location of the strong man of the sticks. Yi Tian became more alert. The next moment, he made a gesture, and the mountain and river seals fell down, smashing many Mingxiu within the coverage to the ground. Then, the mountain and river seal flew up again, turned into a golden light and shot away at the distant place. Yi Tian stepped on the mountain and river seal, and his mind covered a piece of white bone Mingxiu not far away. He found a total of 3 places where he used the mind attack, and the second place was in this white bone nether cultivation queue. Seeing that the mountain and river seal was about to fly to the vicinity of the nether repair queue, it was almost a replica of the previous one. There was also a white shadow in the nether repair queue, which suddenly turned into a white light and disappeared into Yi Tian's vision. It seems that although these netherworld practitioners have a high level, they are very afraid of Shan Hasil and are unwilling to take any risk. As long as they see Shan Hasil, they will run away immediately. Therefore, Yi Tian thought that in the fog sea, those strong men of the Ming family who made ethereal sounds and never dared to fight with themselves should be the ones who made divine attacks. In order to cover themselves, they all used the attached bones of ordinary white bone Ming to confuse the public. At this time, Yi Tian looked at another white bone Mingxiu who was flying eastward, and another divine attack was in that area. Yi Tian's figure moved and flew to the white bone netherworld with the martial spirit puppet. However, he had just moved, and his figure had disappeared from the original place. What disappeared with him was his mountain and river seal. In such a situation, a white shadow rose into the sky in the dark cultivation team he was going to go. Although there was still a long distance between them, the other party took the lead in escaping. Although Yi Tian disappeared, many martial spirit puppets swarmed towards the direction of white shadow flying away, and soon disappeared into the sky. It seemed that they would not stop until they caught up with the strong man of the Hades. Everything looks like these martial spirit puppets are chasing Yi Tian, who is invisible, at least on the surface. However, in fact, Yi Tian didn't go after the Ming Xiu, but was in a state of invisibility and quietly fled by casting his heavenly spirit wings towards the strong man of the Ming clan who fled the second. Although the strong man of netherworld cultivation fled here, he only escaped more than 5,000 miles, stopped his body, and then watched Yi Tian in the air. This strong man of Ming cultivation is one of the 8 Ming emperors of the Ming family, Ghost Feng Ming Emperor. As Yi Tian expected, although the Ghost Feng Ming Emperor has the cultivation achievement and strength equivalent to the great power of the human heavenly palace, he is still extremely afraid of mountain and river seals. A gentleman does not sit under a dangerous wall and has countless Ming cultivation under his hands. Naturally, he will not take risks himself. However, at this time, the Ghost Feng Ming Emperor who was thousands of miles away did not expect that the final goal of Yi Tian, who suddenly disappeared, was himself. And he didn't expect Yi Tian's speed to be so fast. Just after Yi Tiangang disappeared from his place for a few moments, Ghost Feng Ming Emperor was still exploring near the place where he disappeared with his mind. He suddenly felt his body tight and seemed to fall into the swamp. Then he saw a huge mountain and river seal appear out of thin air and quickly fall towards himself. With the cultivation of Ghost Feng Ming Emperor, under the suppression of mountain and river seal, it did not reach the level of immobility and no mana. He was still active, and there was still a trace of mana on him that could not be completely suppressed. But that's all. Although he was still active, he was extremely slow, just like crawling hard in the deep swamp, and the remaining mana on him was just the level of the cave of a human monk. The mountain river seal did not hit to the end, but hung on the head of the Ghost Feng Ming Emperor and continued to suppress it. However, Yi Tian's figure flashed out, and the half-immortal soldier's flying sword fell in his hand, which cut the ordinary skeleton into pieces. Just when the ghost Fengming Emperor's soul wanted to put on his own strong bones again, a terrible thunder appeared out of thin air and blasted at his soul. Yi Tian! Let me go, or I will destroy your Mithraea palace. Under the thunder, the soul made a hoarse voice. Yi Tian has taken out the Millennium Peach with Thunder Sword at this time. Driven by powerful mana, he still continues to bombard each other's soul with thunder. Go to hell! At this time, he roared and tried his best to urge the Thunder Sword. It was stronger than any previous thunder. The thunder appeared in a flash and exploded on the soul of Ghost Fengming Emperor, who was still rushing left and right. Ka! A loud noise shook heaven and earth, and the Ghost Fengming Emperor's soul was split under the thunder, turned into wisps of smoke and dissipated. Yi Tian was still uneasy. He waved the peach with Thunder Sword for thousands of years. Thunder continued to send out and bombarded the wisps of smoke. He didn't stop until the smoke was scattered. At the next moment, he put away the Millennium Peach Thunder Sword and Mountain and River Seal, and his body shape disappeared from the original place again. In two directions tens of thousands away, two white lights are flying away in different directions. It was the other two Netherworld Whitebone Netherworld and Dark Shadow Netherworld who attacked Yi Tian's magic weapon and idea together with Ghost Fengming. The situation that Ghost Fengming Emperor was killed by Yi Tian could not escape the observation of the two Ming Emperors. At this time, they had changed into their usual tall skeletons and bones, and each chose a direction to fly away from the distance without stopping at all, so as to avoid being stealthily attacked by Yi Tian. What a frightened bird! Sensing that the two Hades quickly disappeared within the scope of their own thoughts, Yi Tian did not continue to explore their tracks. At present, he still had to deal with countless Hades who were flying towards the east. According to his estimation, the three Ming emperors that have been revealed should only be part of the highest and strongest of the Ming Xiu. There should be such a level of Ming Xiu who did not expose his identity in countless Ming Xiu armies because he did not send out a divine attack. Those high-level meditations, whether they can send out divine attack or not, are a great trouble to the Mithraea palace. While flying back, Yi Tian issued a divine command to recall the martial soul puppets who acted and feigned with him. A moment later, the martial soul puppets had gathered together with Yi Tian again and followed the team of Mingxiu to hide. At this time, the first Mingxiu in the Fog Sea has also given up the plan to meet with other Mingxiu and began to rush towards the camp of the Oriental Mithraea palace. Ready to fight. Ready to fight. Ready to fight. In the Western War Zone and the Western Forest area, 8 great friars in Yupu territory observed such a situation, immediately gave orders to their disciples, and then met the Mingxiu army alone. High above the sky, Ningyao sat cross-legged on the golden eye statue, prowling around, checking out the spiritual friars who might take advantage of the chaos to carry out stealth attacks. The disciples' front of the Mithraea palace has been opened for thousands of miles. They guard one camp according to the division of different defense areas. The impact of the Mingxiu army is also overwhelming and endless. This is an unprecedented war on a scale beyond any previous one since it was launched with Mingxiu. The 8 great friars in Yupu territory, each with more than 1,000 fully armed martial soul puppets, as the first echelon, are getting closer and closer to Mingxiu. Suddenly, there was a faint black fog in the meditation team in front. As the distance between the two sides got closer and closer, the black fog became thicker and thicker. It seems that the whole Netherworld army has been shrouded in a sea of fog for a short time. Moving fog sea. In the sky, Yan Yunyang's figure stagnated, revealing a thoughtful look. Be careful, everyone. Mingxiu uses the dark stone to urge the dark fog. It takes so much trouble. It is likely that he wants to use the dark poison. At this time, the sound of Yi Tianxin's thought came to Yan Yunyang's ear. With Yi Tian's powerful mind, even thousands of miles apart, he can still send back his voice. In that case, try to kill Mingxiu as much as possible so that the dark fog is not close to ordinary disciples. Yan Yunyang moved in her heart and urged the martial spirit puppet to rush towards the dark fog. Before the start of the war, Yi Tian was worried that all the main participants in the war arranged the plan of the war. This time they adopted a stepped defense strategy. Palace leader Yi Tian is the first to attack and try to kill Mingxiu, who is a major threat to the Maitreya Palace. So far, he has killed dozens of Golden Bone Mingxiu and a ghost Feng Ming Emperor. The second echelon is the Great Friars of Yupu territory. The third echelon is the martial spirit puppet controlled by the disciples of the Maitreya Palace. The fourth echelon is a lot of monsters controlled by the Royal Beast Division. If Mingxiu breaks through the defense line after being blocked by 4 echelons, then the disciples of the Maitreya Palace go to the battle shirtless. Be sure to block Mingxiu within the Western Theater, and no Mingxiu is allowed to enter the Chinese territory. Yan Yunyang began to move, and the other disciples of Yupu territory also opened the array hundreds of miles away. Of course, those great friars in Yupu territory also received the voice of Yi Tian's divine thoughts. The first to bear the brunt is naturally those martial spirit puppets. Those martial spirit puppets are in groups, taking care of each other and rushing into the nether cultivation queue. Chains flew out of the army of Mingxiu and swept towards the Wuhuan puppets. However, under the joint attack of the Wuhuan puppets, most of the chain offensive of Mingxiu was dissolved. While both sides were anxious, the Wuhuan puppets who had not been attacked by the chain were killed to those holding the chain. Several great friars in Yupu territory used their own means to gallop around in the army of Ming cultivation, invincible. Where the martial spirit puppets were tight, they went to help. In the dark fog, I finally found a lot of nether practitioners with nether poison. Fortunately, Yi Tian had been on guard for a long time. Before the war, he had cracked the components of this poison and refined a certain amount of anti-poison antidotes. Naturally, these great friars in Yupu territory are equipped with them. However, this kind of dark poison does not pose a great threat to the great friars in Yupu territory. They are wearing dragon armor. As long as they hold their breath, there will be no accident. 8 great friars in Yupu territory blocked the attack of the Ming cultivation army in 8 directions, but the Ming cultivation in other parts still flew close to the east with the spreading dark fog. In the direction of the western camp, countless figures of martial spirit puppets rose up and killed the approaching Mingxiu. This group of martial spirit puppets has more than 50,000 people. One by one, they are as powerful as tigers. They frantically break into the queue of Mingxiu and ruthlessly kill people. There are only 2 targets for them. One is the Mingxiu who holds the dark stone to release the dark qi, and the other is the Mingxiu who waves the chain to attack. The disciples of the third echelon finally set out. This echelon is not the top force of the Maitreya Palace, but the most powerful part of the overall combat effectiveness. In particular, there are a large number of martial soul puppets. The disciples driving the martial soul puppets are also the most elite among the disciples of the Maitreya Palace. They are all monks in the later stage, peak and even in the realm of God. The strength of the martial spirit puppets is strong, and the strength of these disciples is also strong. After half a month's hard training in the magic weapon cave, the strength of the disciples of the Maitreya Palace has been greatly improved as a whole, especially some friars at the peak of Yuanying realm have broken through to the realm of transforming gods with the help of pills. The total number reached more than 10. Under the strong catalysis of the pill, other monks in the spiritual realm also made breakthroughs in the small realm, and their strength became stronger. The strong resistance of the third echelon immediately stopped the attack of Mingxiu. The roar mixed together in the dark fog, shaking the world. Not only did Mingxiu's flight speed immediately become slow, but also because a large number of Mingxiu who urged the Mingxiu were not killed, the spread speed of the dark fog immediately decreased significantly. In the endless sky, dark fog and clouds surge, and fighting figures are everywhere. At a glance, you can't see the edge. At every moment, many spiritual practices are fragmented, turning into countless broken bones and flying to the ground. Only some Mingxiu who had not been blocked could get away from the regiment and continue to approach the east, but the momentum was much lower than before. Boom, boom. There was a deafening noise in the sky, and the fourth echelon finally appeared on the stage. Hundreds of thousands of monsters opened in front of the camp. Before urging many monsters to attack, the 70,000 monks of the Royal Beast Division made continuous gestures, and countless thunderbolts flew towards the Ming cultivation team, and then exploded in the dark fog. The sky was filled with the terrible explosion of thunderbolt, and endless skeletons scattered in the dark fog. The attack and killing of this wave of thunderbolt alone made the army of Mingxiu suffer heavy casualties. The attack of the Ming Xiu army is one of the obstacles. After a burst of dense thunder, hundreds of thousands of monsters rushed towards Mingxiu, and the sky immediately became more heated and noisy. What shall we do, Martial Mother? Kill it? Behind the battlefield, feeling the unexpected battle, Murphy Fish of Qingming Branch asked Ning Yao. Don't worry. Mingxiu hasn't come yet. Our main goal is those people in the square-inch spirit domain. Ning Yao looked ahead and shook his head. In the distance, the golden eye god carving turned into its original body, wandered back and forth in the sky, and there was golden light flashing in a pair of sharp eyes from time to time. Suddenly, the golden eye eagle in the air made several clear calls. The sound broke through the clouds and fog and spread a very long distance. Hearing the cry of the golden eye god carving, Ning Yao was shocked and said to the nearby Qingming branch, "Attention, disciples, the golden eye god carving has found the whereabouts of the monks in the spirit domain." They quietly left the dark fog and sneaked here. Martial Mother, come to the rear and don't be attacked by the other party. There are several big friars in Yupu territory. Mo Feiyu's body flashed in front of Ning Yao. Don't worry about this. We all wear Huafan clothes, and the other party may not succeed. Ning Yao said carelessly. According to your master's instructions, you are not allowed to attack or retreat without authorization. Just stay here. I believe he will make other arrangements. Ning Yao continued. While talking, the golden eye eagle in the distance suddenly flapped its wings and flew towards the side, and the sound of chirping was sent out again. Launch concentrating powder. Ning Yao made a quick decision and shouted. With her voice, more than 200 disciples of the Qingming branch immediately made rapid gestures, and white beads were ejected one by one, flew into the air ahead, and then exploded in the air. A large area of white powder exploded and fell. When the falling powder fell, it was sure that many human friars in the square-inch spirit domain showed their birth shape in the air, but then those friars in the square-inch spirit domain who were forced to show their movements by the spotlight powder quickly flew up into the air and placed themselves above the flying white powder, and then the earth armor on their body exploded. The falling powder fell on the earth armor. With the explosion of the earth armor, their body shape disappeared from the original place again. Boom! Boom! Several terrible sword lights bursted Ning Yao from a distance, but the big friar Yupu territory, hidden in the square-inch spirit region friars, issued a long-range attack. Ning Yao's position is so eye-catching that the other party naturally has no reason to be invisible, and her appearance is the same as the original. Naturally, she was quickly recognized by the big friars in Yupu territory. Martial Mother, danger! Many disciples of the Qingming branch shouted loudly and stood in front of Ning Yao. Ning Yao! I didn't expect you to be resurrected, but it's useless. Today is your death, a voice suddenly came from the nothingness in the sky. With this sound, a cold on suddenly appeared and came towards Ning Yao. Just when the cold light in the previous attacks were about to fall into the Qingming branch camp, suddenly, a huge dark golden shadow appeared out of thin air in front of the people, blocking in front of the disciples of the Qingming branch. Those seemingly imposing and particularly terrible attacks suddenly stopped in front of the dark golden shadow, as if they were fixed. The dark golden shadow became larger in an instant, and suddenly it was the mountain and river seal of Tian. The strong gravity field makes the long-range attack of the big friar in Fangsu and Lingyu Pujing instantly suppressed and can no longer advance half a minute. Start the array. On the mountain and river seal, Tian suddenly showed his body shape and drank loudly. There was a buzzing noise in the nothingness not far ahead, but there was no field on the surface. However, Tian had a sneer on his lips and made a gesture. The 3 round beads shot away in the distance. At the same time, he shouted, "Release the body beads." Smelling the speech, in the void ahead, suddenly countless round beads flew all over the sky and shot away in the distance. Every 3 round beads were a group, emitting dazzling white light, like countless stars, illuminating half of the sky. Under the light of the fixed body pearl, not only those invisible disciples of the Maitreya palace appeared, but also those monks in the square-inch spiritual domain farther away. Tian, what field do you use? An old man in Yupu territory who was forced to show his body in the distance saw that many disciples were swallowed up by the invisible field started by Tian and couldn't help shouting. Then you will know. Yi Tianling snorted, and the mountain and river seal turned into an electric light, revealing the countless square-inch spiritual region friars in the distance. Almost at the same time, he shouted, "Xingming blessed land disciple, revenge! Revenge!" A loud shout broke out among the disciples of Qingming branch, and then more than 200 disciples flashed and flew away with the mountain and river seal. Withdraw! At this time, the old man shouted loudly and wanted to withdraw with the disciples of Fengsuan spirit domain. At this time, a bright light flashed around him and shot at him. The old man wanted to dodge, but the white light was too fast. In an instant, it was covered by a big net transformed by the white light. Shenrun showed his body at this time, made a gesture, directly abolished the old man's cultivation and sent it into the spirit beast ring. Seeing this situation, another female friar in Yupu territory had no time to take care of other disciples. Her whole body sent out a circle of aura ripples, so she wanted to use the great movement technique to escape. At this moment, a dark shadow shot to him with fear of mana fluctuation. The female nun had no time to continue to perform the great movement, so she had to dodge aside. Her speed was not fast, which could almost be described as being as fast as a wind. However, the black light was faster. When it turned in the air, it locked the woman. The next moment, it hit her with a bang and made a terrible explosion. In the explosion, the female nun was blown to pieces, and even the Yuan god turned into a piece of debris and disappeared into invisibility in the terrible explosion. Among countless pieces of flesh and blood, the shadow finally turned into its original shape. It was a Hou-Yi arrow. With one successful arrow, Hou-Yi's arrow turned around in the air, shot away in the distance, and flew back to Yin Yunyang several miles away. Under Yi Tian's careful arrangement, this siege has killed 2 big friars in Yupu territory in Fengsuan spirit domain just at the beginning. The other 3 were trapped in the field arranged by Morong Chu Chu. This field is the Nining enchanting field once arranged by the Ming clan. There are also many square-inch spiritual friars trapped in the field. Yi Tian knew very well that with the field attainments of the friars of Fengsuan spirit domain, he could not break the Nining enchanting field in a short time. He simply stopped managing the trapped friars in the field and began to frantically surround the friars of Fengsuan spirit domain outside the field. The sky is full of fixed body beads emitting white light, which makes those square-inch spiritual friars who are forced to reveal their birth form have nowhere to hide. They fled everywhere, but they were stopped and killed by the disciples of the Maitreya palace. Under the suppression of Shanhian, the disciples of Qingming branch were like chopping melons and vegetables, sweeping away the nearby monks of Fengsuan spirit domain. Those martial spirit puppets also display their divine power, such as entering a no-man's land and ruthlessly reaping the lives of monks in the spirit domain. Xianrun and Yin Yunyang also joined the battle circle. A large number of martial soul puppets carried by them came from the outside to the inside, completely cutting off the path of friars in Fengsuan spirit domain. Ning Yao released the fierce flying sword and was also carrying out crazy revenge. Ning Yao, who has always had a soft expression, was full of anger at this time. No matter whether the friars of the 8 sects of Fengsuan Lingyu were male or female, she would not let go, and she had the potential to kill them all. Not only was the fierce soldier's flying sword moving, but she also carried out the attack and killing in person with a half-immortal soldier magic weapon. However, in a moment's effort, nearly 20,000 square-inch spiritual region friars have been killed. There are no living square-inch spiritual region friars outside the field. Yaoer, you can defend here. The enemies trapped in the field will not be able to come out for the time being. When the Ming army retreats, we will finally deal with them. At this time, seeing that the battle here was over, Yi Tian hurriedly said to Ning Yao, urging Shan Hain and leading his martial spirit puppet to kill in the distance. To this extent, the war in the sky became more and more chaotic. Some Ming Xiu who broke through the 4 lines of defense in succession finally encountered the crazy sniping of the 5th echelon. The friars of the 5th echelon are only the friars of Jindan and Longmen in the Maitreya palace, although their accomplishments do not occupy an advantage. However, in their camp, they arranged a survey of Huafen stone, thousands of miles across, blocking the advance route of the Ming army. The 5th echelon's disciples of the Maitreya palace are the largest of all echelons, including some of Yi Tian's disciples, dead men and Kunlun Xiu, who are also defending in this area to ensure that a Ming Xiu does not cross the defense line. With the aid of Huafan's stone defense belt, Mingxiu lost all his mana here and was only allowed to be slaughtered. Although it is the last line of defense, it is the most relaxed here. The existence of Huafan's stone defense zone is like an insurmountable gap, which lies in front of many meditation practitioners, so that they dare not approach it easily. There was no way to go. Those Mingxiu had to turn back and join the fierce battle. At this time, no one dared to launch a divine attack because of the previous experience and lessons learned by the powerful emperor of the Netherworld. Because 2 of the 3 Ming emperors who sent out the divine attack have been killed by Tian. Compared with their long life and hard-won cultivation, the death and life of some Ming cultivation is not what they care about most. On the side of the Maitreya Palace, the biggest weakness is the small number of people. However, the disciples of the Maitreya Palace, together with the martial spirit puppets and monsters, add up to nearly 600,000. Although it is more than 10 times less than the Nether cultivation, there is no doubt about the advantage here. Tens of thousands of martial spirit puppets are extremely powerful and have amazing defense. They simply attack regardless and have no idea of defense. The disciples of the Maitreya Palace who rushed into the Hell Army camp also have strong defense. They are all wearing armor and treasure clothes. Wherever they go, they not only greatly reduce the attack power of the Hell cultivation, but also ignore the attack of the other party. And the chain army of Mingxiu could not give full play to his powerful advantage when the Maitreya Palace had been prepared for it. The war is always going on. With the passage of time, the situation on the battlefield is slowly changing. The attack of the Netherworld cultivation army was effectively restrained, and the scope of the Netherworld fog began to narrow gradually. The Netherworld chi, which was not very strong, began to drift slowly in the sky, no longer as strong as before. A large number of Hades died under the fierce attack of the Maitreya Palace, and some Hades began to retreat. Once the situation of collapse was formed, Mingxiu's backward steps swept back like a wave. Yi Tian and 8 big friars in Yupu territory took the lead to hide and kill. Everywhere you go, there are white bones flying, countless Mingxiu falling, and there are no complete bones in death. Kill! In the scuffle, Yi Tian shouted loudly, released the original spiritual fire, and rushed frantically into the queue of Mingxiu. With Yi Tian's crazy hiding and killing with the disciples of the Maitreya Palace, Mingxiu finally began an all-round rout. Some practitioners who were close to the first fog retreated into the first fog sea, while others could not enter the fog because they were far away or were chased by the power of the Maitreya Palace. They had to give up this fog sea and start to rush to other fog. However, no matter where the Hell practitioners fled, the disciples of the Maitreya Palace pursued them all the way with demons, beasts, and martial spirit puppets, and did not mean to let them leave. Some fast-moving Mingxiu can escape far ahead and safely enter the fog sea. However, due to the strong resistance of the Maitreya Palace, the latter has no chance to enter the first fog sea, so they have to give up here and run crazy towards the fog sea farther away. It seems that only the fog sea is the safe holy land in their hearts. Yi Tian, let's stop fighting. Open the entrance to the underworld and let us go back. From then on, the underworld will not enter the Earth Star. At the edge of the first fog sea, Yi Tian, who was madly blocking the entry into the fog sea, suddenly heard an ethereal voice from the dark fog. If the other party makes a mind attack, he can still distinguish the source of the mind attack, but this ethereal voice, under the cover of the dark fog, even with his current mind, is powerless. It's too late, old ghost, it's too late to say anything now. Now that you Mingxiu have arrived at the Earth Star, stay here forever. Yi Tian gestured and kept moving. The mountains and rivers printed on the edge of the fog sea flew around, suppressing the Mingxiu who tried to rush into the fog sea, while the martial spirit puppets were very cooperative and frantically killing the Mingxiu. Must we not die? The ethereal voice came out again. Yes, never die. Since you dare to invade the Earth Star, your underworld will bear the consequences you can't bear. Yi Tian spoke and moved, driving the mountain and river seal. In an instant, he had come tens of miles away. A large number of Mingxiu were breaking through a gap and pouring into the dark fog. Shanhian covered about 100 mu of space, and then the martial spirit puppets he led flew to him and began the crazy killing again. Yi Tian, you will regret. The ethereal voice finished and became silent. Yi Tian doesn't care about each other's threats. He has been ruthless in his heart and wants to destroy all these Mingxiu on the Earth Star.
The crazy slaughter continued. Because Yi Tianqin blocked here, the defeated Mingxiu dared not continue to throw himself into the net, but bypassed the fog sea here and rushed to the next fog sea.
Look, there are very few Mingxiu here.
Yi Tian's body moves and urges the mountain and river sealtail to go with the pursuit of Degu's Mingxiu.
Everywhere he passes, white bones are flying and countless corpses are falling.
After chasing thousands of miles, Yi Tian suddenly stopped and watched the picture in his mind.
The picture was sent back from the entrance of the underworld in the third fog sea.
The picture was naturally a 4-star heartworm left by Yi Tian. The picture shows that the huge Huafan stone suppressed at the entrance of the underworld suddenly disappears a little, and then a terrible flame probes out from the entrance of the underworld, and the surrounding Huafan stones are still melting slowly under the burning of the flame.
What a powerful flame! Yi Tian moved and fled towards the third fog sea. Huafan stone can suppress the mana of Mingxiu.
Such a huge Huafan stone weighs tens of millions of tons.
Without mana blessing, Mingxiu must be unable to move away.
When melting all the stones, Tiangong branch added many hard natural materials and earth treasures. Similarly, without the support of mana, it is completely impossible to chisel all the stones with such strength. However, Yi Tian did not expect that the method of melting with fire was adopted in the netherworld, and the flame used in the netherworld was still so terrible. While he was flying away, the picture in his mind showed that Huafan stones were melted quickly, and the nether cultivation in the fog sea rushed into the netherworld madly from the exposed entrance to the netherworld.
The 10 martial spirit puppets Yi Tian left there could not stop the Ming cultivation like the tide. Ha ha!
Yi Tian, as soon as the holy fire of the underworld comes out, you can no longer close the entrance of the underworld. Today's revenge will be rewarded in the future. When Yi Tianfei fled, the voice appeared in the last fog sea in the distance. Yi Tianling snorted, covered tens of thousands of miles around, sent out a divine thought and recalled his original spiritual fire. Under the cover of his mind, he found that those Mingxiu who had fled to other fog seas also began to turn around and come towards the third fog sea one after another. It seems that this fog sea has become the center of a vortex, attracting all the meditation to converge there. The situation on the battlefield immediately changed. Although it was a one-sided massacre, all the forces in the Maitreya Palace could not stop Mingxiu from running to the third fog sea. Countless skeletons fell, and many white bone Mingxiu poured into the fog sea, entered the space channel and disappeared. It seems that the fundamental purpose of the melting stones in the underworld is to meet the Mingxiu trapped on the Earth Star, and there is no intention of sending troops for reinforcements. After opening the entrance, the holy fire of the underworld, which melted and suppressed the mortal stones at the entrance of the underworld, quietly retreated, and the flame could no longer be seen in sight. If you use the mountain and river seal at this time, Yi Tian can continue to suppress the entrance of the underworld. However, Yi Tian is not sure that the mountain and river seal can block the melting of the holy fire in the underworld.
Yi Tian doesn't want to take this risk.
Moreover, more importantly, if the entrance is opened up, it can make Mingxiu all rush to the only hope, then it can completely eliminate the hidden danger for the Earth Star. Otherwise, although Yi Tian is confident that he will kill all the nether practitioners, he can't guarantee that those nether practitioners won't hurt the innocent everywhere, because there are too many nether practitioners, and the east can't pass, but once they spread to the west, it must be impossible to find all these nether practitioners and kill them in a short time. How about Yi Tian secretly calculated that he was going to the edge of the fog sea, and he stopped?
Ha ha! Yi Tian, the emperor is gone. Don't worry, we will come back. You can't stop us.
In the fog sea, the ethereal voice came out again.
Yi Tian, we will repay this revenge. You can't seal the entrance of the underworld.
There is the holy fire of the underworld, and your seal and black sand can't do anything. At this time, another ethereal voice came out of the fog sea.
It also looked ethereal, with an arrogant tone in the voice. Yi Tianling snorted, 2 old ghosts, let's wait and see.
As he spoke, Yi Tian fought and summoned 10 martial spirit puppets guarding the entrance of the underworld to break out, so as to prevent them from becoming prisoners of the underworld. Fortunately, those Mingxiu just tried their best to escape back to the underworld and didn't mean to fight with the 10 martial spirit puppets. After saying that, the two voices were silent and disappeared. They also didn't mean to start. Palace leader, it seems that the entrance of the underworld has been repaired by the underworld. Do you want to kill it and block the entrance? At this time, Morong Jun of Shuiwei branch appeared in front of Yi Tian. Yes, the underworld still has many means. They used the holy fire of the underworld, melt the Huathan stone and reopen the entrance of the underworld, but... Next, Yi Tian didn't say it directly. Instead, he said to Morong Jun, the entrance doesn't have to be closed for the time being. Leave a glimmer of hope for Mingxiu, block on the periphery and kill Mingxiu as much as possible. I see. Murongjun promised, and his body flashed to kill in the distant Mingxiu queue. This fierce interception took a long time to end. The fog sea with a radius of tens of thousands of miles cannot be completely blocked by the hands of the Maitreya Palace. Yi Tian adopts the method of half-sealing and half-releasing, and concentrates his superior forces to kill Mingxiu as much as possible. While killing Mingxiu, try to reduce the loss of the Maitreya Palace as much as possible. 3 or 4 hours later, outside the fog sea, there was no figure of Mingxiu except the power of the Maitreya Palace. To be exact, there is only the body of Mingxiu, and we can no longer see the living Mingxiu. What should the palace master do now? Several big friars in Yupu state appeared almost at the same time around Yi Tian. Yan Yunyang asked eagerly as soon as she appeared. All the disciples in Yupu territory and all the martial spirit puppets go after them in the dark fog, and the other disciples defend overseas in the fog. Yi Tian shouted loudly and spread the voice far away. Then he took the lead and drove the mountain and river seal into the fog sea. With his order, figures flashed one after another and killed them in the dark fog. The entrance of the underworld covers an area of 30 or 40 mu. The entrance of this level can pass many underworld repairs at one time, and a large number of underworld corrections return to the underworld from the entrance. However, because there are too many netherworld practitioners, many netherworld practitioners who enter the netherworld fog have not arrived at the entrance in the fog sea with a radius of nearly 20,000 miles. These spiritual practices on the way became the targets of the Maitreya Palace. At this time, Mingxiu had been killed by the Maitreya Palace. Once he saw the figure of the Wulin puppet, he didn't dare to fight at all. They took a detour and fled far, trying to get close to the entrance of the underworld from other directions. However, the speed of the martial soul puppet that half steps into the divine realm is so fast. The high realm of nether cultivation can hide, and the low realm of nether cultivation is not so lucky. In the face of martial soul puppets, those dark monks are still like this, not to mention Shanye Tian and many great monks in Yupu territory? After a crazy siege, the army of the underworld finally left countless bones again and fled back to the underworld through the entrance of the underworld. The fog sea was very clean in an instant. The disciples of the Maitreya Palace searched carefully in the fog sea and killed some sporadic Mingxiu who could not escape. Morong Jun, stay here in the fog sea to prevent Mingxiu from entering the fog sea again through the entrance. A moment later, Yi Tian called 8 great friars from Yupu territory and began to arrange the finishing task. Yan Zhongkai is responsible for cleaning the second fog sea. Tan Suqing, responsible for cleaning the fourth fog sea. Yu Yan, responsible for cleaning the fifth fog sea. In addition to Yan Yunyang and Xianrun, the other 6 great friars in Yupu territory were all arranged by Yi Tian. The disciples of the other divisions began to clean the battlefield. Yi Tianzi returned to the western camp with Xianrun and Yan Yunyang. Yi Tian, did those Mingxiu escape back? When they flew to Ningyao, Ningyao asked. Don't worry, they can't escape. Instead of taking the earth as a battlefield, they'd better take the underworld as a battlefield, so as not to hurt the innocent on the earth. Next, solve the enemies in the field first. Yi Tian said, moving forward to avoid in front. Voice downstairs, he waved to the east. Kunlun practitioners and the dead soldiers stationed in the rear Fenghua Fancher defense belt immediately moved and flew here. Yi Tian gestured, and a round mana appeared out of thin air, slowly floating forward. With the flight of the mana circle, it became bigger and bigger, and gradually expanded to more than 10 miles. Then it fell towards the ground. Arrange all stone slabs around the circle. Yi Tian then ordered. They immediately took action and scattered in the direction of the circle. They took out the Huafan slate and arranged it around the circle. Other disciples with Huafan slate flew over to help. Nearly 10,000 disciples soon arranged a thick layer of defense belt in the area designated by Yi Tian. Then, with a wave of Yi Tian's gesture, more than 2,000 martial spirit puppets moved themselves and came to the isolation belt made of Huafan slate.
Let go of the pearl! Yi Tian shouted again. With his words, countless fixed body beads were released, which not only covered the area designated by Yi Tian, but also filled the nearby sky with the light of fixed body beads, just like the stars in the sky. At the next moment, Yi Tian's mountain and river seal had been magnified and covered in the sky again. Then he nodded slightly to Xian Run and Yan Yunyang. They understood. One took out Tian Luonet and the other took out Ho Yi's Bao. Yi Tian was not at ease with this arrangement. He looked around and shouted again, "Lock the sky array flag in place." Hearing the sound, more than 30 Kunlun Shou who owned the Skylock array flag immediately flew into the air, took out the array flag and was ready to inspire at any time. After the arrangement, Yi Tiankai nodded slightly to Morong in the crowd, "Clear, remove the field." Yes, Shifu, although Yi Tian has not formally worshipped the master, he has promised to accept himself as an apprentice. He simply changed his name. This sound, master, immediately attracted many envious eyes. Morong said it clearly in his mouth. He put his index finger and middle finger together. A visible mana hit somewhere in the void, and then hit 8 manas in another 8 directions. Just when the 9th magic power was released, the scene in front of everyone suddenly changed, but they saw the figure of more than 20,000-inch spiritual friars trapped in the field out of thin air. At the moment when Morong clearly removed the 9-in enchanted field, the mountain and river seal suddenly flashed, and the huge mountain and river seal suddenly flew over some friars. When the other party found that the field disappeared and fled with the skill of great movement, he suppressed 2 friars in Yupu territory in the crowd. At this time, Xianrun has also shot, and the Tian Luo net in his hand suddenly sends out a bright light to net a middle-aged monk who was about to perform the great movement. Seeing this, Yin Yunyang had already opened Ho Yi's Bao before slowly releasing her hand. The only 3 great friars in Yupu territory left in the 8 patriarchal sects have all been made, and the rest are not worried. Even to deal with these ordinary monks in the square-inch spirit domain, there is no need to use Ho Yi Bao. Yi Tian arranged so many defenses, but he made such a foolproof arrangement because he was worried about the unexpected. In fact, the Huafan stone isolation belt is arranged around. Even if the Great Friar of Yupu territory performs the great movement, he will show his body when passing through the Huafan stone isolation belt because his mana is affected. Although it is likely to recover mana after crossing the stone isolation zone due to inertia, it is enough for Yi Tian to do it during this short exposure. Looking at the tens of thousands of disciples of the Maitreya palace around them, those friars in the Fengsuan spirit domain who were outside the suppression of mountain and river seal did not dare to act rashly. They gathered together one after another, as if they could play a protective role. Luo Qiqiu. Wu Fingjiao. Did you think of today? Ningyao moved, stepped on the fierce flying sword and flew into the circle of Huafan stone bag. Beside him were 263 disciples of Qingming branch and more than 2,000 martial spirit puppets controlled by Qingming branch. The 2 names she called out were the leaders of Sanling Mountain and Danxia Blessed Land who participated in the attack on her and Yi Tian. Although they were suppressed by mountain and river seals, they were not as motionless as other low-level monks. At least they could barely speak and their eyes could rotate. Ning. Fairy Ning Yao, it may have been a mistake. Misunderstanding, the nun named Wu Fingjiao said intermittently. At this time, suddenly several figures in the distance burst up and rushed towards Ning Yao regardless of everything. Yi Tian's body shape gently scooped, and the fierce soldier's flying sword under his feet turned into a light and flew towards the people with a flash of lightning. Where the cold light passed, the monks turned into many pieces of broken meat and fell below the ground. Ning Yao snorted coldly, "Wu Fingjiao, put away these ghost thoughts. I Ning Yao have been guarding against you for a long time. It's impossible to take me and coerce Yi Tianfang to leave. In those years, the destruction of the Qingming Blessed Land was thanks to you. Today is the day of revenge for the Qingming Blessed Land. No one here can leave alive. You deserve blood for blood. Up.
Wu Fingjiao looked ferocious and shouted loudly. As long as the body was not suppressed by the mountain and river seal, all the friars in the square-inch spirit domain rushed towards Ning Yao.
Go! Kill them!
The cold light in Ning Yao's eyes flashed, and the square-inch spirit region friar who rushed to the distance pointed. Under the control of Xian Dragon Sword Spirit, the fierce soldier's flying sword flashed continuously and cut off at the comber. Almost at the same time, more than 2,000 martial spirit puppets also rushed to kill each other. All the friars in Fengsuan spirit region knew that the only chance now was to catch Ning Yao, whose cultivation looked very low. Only in this way could Yi Tian be forced to obey and maybe have a glimmer of vitality. More than 2,000 martial spirit puppets were in front of them and directly collided with the friars of Fengsuan spirit region who rushed up. In the back is Ning Yao with the disciples of Qingming branch, also directly facing the friars in Fengsuan spirit domain.
Yi Tian's own disciples, retinues and dead men then joined the camp.
The rest of the people did not join the battle group under Yi Tian's obstruction, because it was a war of revenge, which needed the Qingming branch and Yi Tian's disciples to do it themselves.
Even Shenran and Yan Yunyan didn't do it. If Yi Tian is willing, it's only a matter of minutes to kill the square-inch spirit region friars who have been surrounded by Huafan stone. In that case, it would be meaningless. What Yi Tian wanted was to let Wu Fingjiu and her disciples see how their disciples died one by one in the revenge of Qingming blessed land. Not only Wu Fingjiao, but also uncle and nephew Zhao Tianhu, who had been captured before, were released and thrown into the encirclement. Both of them have long been abandoned and become disabled, but they must have a look at this big play. The great friar of Yupu territory just captured by Shenran was also abandoned. With a painful expression on his face, he looked at the fight in the surrounding circle. There are not many troops invested in the Maitreya Palace itself, but tens of thousands of Maitreya Palace disciples are around. Yi Tian's mountain and river seals suppress a large number of Maitreya Palace friars within 100 acres. In addition, 2 big friars in Yupu territory are eyeing in the sky and are likely to attack at any time. All these are frightening the friars in the spirit area. First of all, they are weaker than before in terms of momentum. In terms of real combat power, more than 2,000 martial soul puppets are absolutely invincible, and the Huafan stone clothes on the disciples of the Maitreya Palace also greatly reduce the strength of the monks in the spirit domain. In this way, various factors add up, and this war of revenge has become a massacre from the beginning. The disciples of the Qingming branch, Murphy Fish, were the most poisoned by the 8 sects of Fengsuan Lingyu. If Yi Tian hadn't rescued them, they might have been devastated to death in the mountainside. New hatred and old hatred erupted in their eyes. Kill! Revenge! Kill! The disciple of Qingming branch once waved the half-immortal soldier magic weapon in his hand and cut it at the other party. In the battlefield, there were screams and blood splashing. Bodies fell from the air and fell into the yellow sand below. This is the price you paid for your original behavior. From then on, the 8 sects will be removed from the spiritual domain. Yi Tian looked at the scene coldly and said coldly in his voice. Under the suppression of mountain and river seal, Wu Fingjiao and others had a dead gray color on their faces, and even their bodies were trembling slightly. Zhao Tianhu saw the outside world for the first time since he was captured last time. At this time, when he was in the encirclement circle and saw the scene of revenge being staged, he had already lost his prestige as a great monk in Yupu territory, and his face was also very pale. This situation was absolutely unexpected at the beginning. No one expected that 2 years ago, Yi Tian was just a monk watching the sea. After only 2 years, he rose so strongly and had enough power to easily destroy the 8 sections. But in the face of this situation, he was powerless and helpless. He could only watch his disciples be ruthlessly killed by people in Qingming blessed land. As time went by, the friars of Fengsuan spirit region in the encirclement circle were killed because they looked around. They no longer took the initiative to attack the disciples of Qingming branch, but slowly moved closer to one side and gathered together again. Even so, it still can't stop the revenge of the disciples of Qingming sect. Those disciples of Qingming blessed land were filled with hatred. Thinking of the tragic end of Qingming blessed land, they had no compassion at all. They still ruthlessly waved the sword of revenge and killed them one by one. Why? Why do you want us to bear the abuse you made? Let's bury it with you.
A disciple of the 8 sects of Fangsu and Lingyu finally began to collapse under such crazy revenge. He shouted at Zhao Tianhu, who sat on the ground in the distance.
Why? You buried us here. I hate. Poof. The disciple's voice hasn't fallen yet. He has been beheaded by Ningyao's fierce soldier flying sword. We are not reconciled. Dante, spare us.
Another disciple of the 8 great sects also roared at this time.
Have you ever spared the disciples of Qingming Blessed Land?
Murphy Fish snorted coldly, waved the half-immortal soldier's flying sword in his hand, and cut the shouting disciple in half.
I can't fight, beg for mercy. People still don't accept it.
Revenge continues, there are fewer and fewer living soul areas, and there are more and more bodies in the siege. Many friars in the square-inch spirit domain screamed in despair and were ruthlessly killed. All begging for mercy was useless.
Gradually, in addition to the monks suppressed by Shanhian, there were only uncle and nephew Zhao Tianhu and another big monk in Yupu territory.
Ningyao holds a bloody half-immortal soldier flying sword. In front of her, the fierce soldier flying sword is suspended in the air and trembles slightly.
Go. Cut.
Ningyao pointed at the 3 people and immediately several disciples flew over and killed them in an instant. Next, the disciples of Qingming branch wearing Xianin stone clothes rushed into the suppression range of Shanhe Seal and began to clean up the last part of the enemy.
Under the suppression of Shanhian, these people had no resistance.
Soon, all the remaining monks in the spirit domain were swept away.
The scene calmed down.
The disciples of Qingming Blessed Land were silently suspended in the air, looking at the countless bones below.
His face was still hard to hide his anger and sadness.
Tian motioned to put away the mountain and river seal, glanced slowly across the battlefield, flew slowly to Ningyao, held Ningyao's hand, and said softly, hatred has disappeared, the dead are comforted, let go of the past from now on, and there is still a long way to go in the future.
Ningyao nodded gently, put it down. What else can't put it down when you see that the current Maitreya palace is so prosperous?
Tian nodded with satisfaction, released his mind and observed the situation of each fog sea.
Everything was normal.
Several teams he sent were cleaning up a few residual Mingxiu. The spiritual accomplishments left on the Earth Star are very low and cannot pose any threat to the disciples of the Maitreya Palace.
Some small-scale battles start and end in a hurry. For the time being, there is no threat from Mingxiu. There are only some finishing matters left.
Next, Tian observes the situation in Death Valley through his mind.
After returning to Earthstar, Tian didn't ignore the surveillance of Death Valley in the process of fighting against nether cultivation. However, it's always calm there.
In addition, there's a lot of pressure on Mingxiu, so Tian doesn't pay special attention to the situation there. At this time, under the cover of God's mind, the situation of Death Valley is vivid and particularly clear. However, this time, the situation he observed on the death side was different from that in the past. There was still no grass, but there were dense black air seeping outward on the bare ground in the Death Valley. The black air spread in the air and soon disappeared. Such a situation was abnormal.
Tian could not help frowning. The next moment, he greeted Xianran and Yan Yunyan, moved and disappeared from the original place. Xianran and Yan Yunyan were surprised and followed Tian.
In a moment, Tian appeared outside the Death Valley. Then, there was a ripple of aura around him, and Xianran and Yan Yunyan also showed their birth form.
Palace Master. Is this?
Yan Yunyan asked in surprise, looking at the black gas coming out of the valley in the distance. This valley is called Death Valley.
The eye of the demon world is hidden under the ground.
You can connect with the demon world through the eye of the demon world. It is calculated that there should be a few months before the demon world enters the Earth Star, but there are signs here.
Tian said, while Yuan Tian's eyes shone through and looked into the valley.
Yuan Tianyan noticed that the black and white symbols of yin and yang and life and death in the field of life and death rhyme in Death Valley had disappeared, and the whole field of life and death rhyme had disappeared out of thin air.